Mama. Every story starts somewhere, and mine is no different. Some like to begin their stories talking about themselves, but I know I wouldn't be here if it weren't for my mama, so I guess I'll start with what I know about her. I don't know much, except for what the other slaves have told me. They all seem to smile when they tell stories about my mama. Her skin was as black as a night void of stars. I guess that's why I stare at the night sky whenever I can, hoping to catch a glimpse of her or feel close to her in some way. I know that doesn't make a lick of sense, but it gives me hope and makes me feel better. All I have is hope. Some say hope is dangerous for a slave, but I have nothing else to cling to, nothing else to keep me from swinging from the tree in Massa's yard. I imagine myself there, swinging like the Henry boys who stared too long at Massa's daughter. Forgive my rambling diary. Massa doesn't know I can write. Every single word I put on these old, faded pages is a risk to my life. But back to Mama. I guess the only way to tell it is how it was told to me. The night was cold and dark, darker than most Mississippi nights. The wind howled through the trees like a ghastly horn of death. "Hush now, don't want to wake the massa," a kind older slave whispered. She gently touched Hannah's cheek. Hannah dripped with sweat, her face furrowed in pain. "I can't have this baby," Hannah gasped. Hannah was little more than a child herself. The old woman looked at her sadly, knowing Hannah wouldn't survive this. She was too young, her body not fully formed yet. She was still a baby herself. The older woman wanted to cry, but knew she had to be strong for Hannah. It seemed strength was all slave women had to offer their people, a sense of strength and pride, even when they had none. She remembered Hannah singing as she worked in the fields, remembered her precious, innocent smile. Innocence was something rare on the plantation, something that never lasted long. As soon as the white man noticed it, they destroyed it. It almost seemed like the sight of youth and innocence hurt them in some way. They hunted for it, and when they found it, they took that poor girl into the woods. All anyone would hear were her screams and pleading as they beat and ravaged her. Hannah had caught the eye of Massa Williams himself. He would stare at her, a child who had barely begun to bleed, with lust in his cold, evil blue eyes. All the women folk knew what would soon happen to Hannah and her innocence. They all hung their heads in shame, powerless to stop it. Massa Williams, like the other white men, would creep to the field shacks in the dead of night and pull a slave girl from her mother's bed. If that poor girl came back, she was beaten so badly she could barely stand. The girl she had been died in those woods at the hands of the white men. Hannah was no different. The night Massa Williams dragged Hannah out of her bed broke the old woman's heart. Hannah the hummingbird, that's what they called her because she was always humming something. No one knew exactly what she was humming, but it always sounded beautiful. Massa Williams took that from her. He took her beautiful, innocent humming from the entire plantation. Now here she lay, barely more than a girl, about to birth Massa Williams' baby. "Hummingbird, please don't scream," the older woman pleaded, glancing around to ensure the overseers hadn't seen them yet. Hannah gripped the old, filthy blanket she lay on and bit down on her lip so hard it bled. She nodded and stifled another scream of pain. The old woman leaned down and looked between Hannah's thin legs. "Your baby's coming," the old woman whispered. She looked up and smiled at Hannah, but it wasn't a smile of joy. No black mother ever smiled or allowed herself to feel joy or pride in the child she birthed. How could they? They were giving birth to a child born of rape, a child destined to be a slave sold off to another plantation. Slave women had to void their hearts of the joys of motherhood. "Remember, child, this is Massa Williams' baby," the old woman said. Hannah locked eyes with her, still struggling to let go of her child. But she had to. If the birthing didn't kill her, The grief would. Slaves were nothing more than a means to produce more slaves. Hannah shook her head, fire burning in her eyes. "This is Massa Williams' baby," the old woman repeated. Hannah stifled another scream and pushed again. The old woman could see the child's head. "Please, Hummingbird, understand. This is Massa Williams' baby," the old woman said again. She wasn't trying to hurt Hannah, just trying to prepare her for the cruel reality of what was to come if she survived. "As a slave, you owned nothing in this life. I doubted that there was a heaven for us. It just sounded like another plantation governed by another white man." "Overseer's coming," a slave whispered in the darkness. The old woman frowned. Hannah stared off into the trees in terror. "They can't have my baby," Hannah pleaded with the old woman. There was nothing the old woman could do. She hated to leave Hannah here, but she had risked her life long enough with her. Few of her people got to grow old. I was not sure if that was a blessing or a curse, but that old woman had stayed alive and unscathed by knowing when to leave. She stared at Hannah sadly and shook her old graying head. "I'm sorry, Hummingbird," the old woman said. "Don't leave me," Hannah gasped. The old woman frowned and disappeared into the trees. Hannah could not help the scream that erupted from her lips. She wondered what poor slave girl heard her scream, knowing that their day in the woods was not far off. Hannah rubbed her stomach and tried to hum. She hadn't hummed since the last time she was in these woods, since Massa Williams put his baby in her. She felt the child sliding out of her as she pushed. Like a dam finally giving way to the pressure of the water, her baby fell onto the old, dirty blanket. Hannah sighed in relief. The pressure and pain were finally gone. The weight of her child being in her was finally gone. That relief quickly turned to worry. "Why ain't you crying, baby?" Hannah asked. She winced painfully as she leaned between her legs to pick up her child. Her skin was pale, almost like that of a corpse. Hannah's young heart felt like it was going to burst. It was a girl. She was as beautiful as a rose. She couldn't believe that such a beautiful thing could be born from such hate and pain. She gently kissed her baby on her soft, pale lips. Hannah was torn. Her heart was broken that her child might have been born dead, but she was relieved that her child would never be a slave, that her sweet Rose would never grow to be taken into these accursed woods by a white man. "I'm gonna call you Rose," Hannah said. She kissed her baby again and sobbed. Her tears fell on Rose's tiny face. Hannah had resigned herself to the fact that her baby had died. She leaned back against a tree and screamed. She didn't care if the overseers heard her. She had a feeling deep in her gut, deep in her soul, that she would be free today. That she would see her baby, her sweet Rose, in whatever afterlife awaited a slave. "Rose is a beautiful name for a slave. I'm sure Master Williams will like that," the voice of an overseer hissed. He sounded like the devil himself, like a corpse that refused to die. His voice brought doom upon her soul, which had resigned itself to dying in peace with her baby in her arms. Hannah looked at the dirty, short, pale man in horror. The man smiled, showing a row of rotted and decayed teeth. He looked like a cadaver. How could these vile things have taken her people? The man seemed to feed off her fear. "Why ain't Master Williams' baby crying, nigger?" the overseer asked. Hannah didn't want to answer him. She was dying anyway. She knew she would not make it out of these woods alive. The overseer sneered at her and quickly snatched Rose from her arms. Hannah struggled to get up. She wanted to protect her child's corpse from the vile evil of white men. She regretted that she was ever touched by one. The pain was too intense and she fell back down, sobbing in pain. Blood flowed from her like a small stream seeking a river. The overseer laughed at her and placed his filthy ear on Rose's pale, bare chest. "This baby ain't dead," the overseer said. He roughly turned Rose over and smacked her hard on her butt. Hannah winced as the man struck her newborn child. The overseer turned the child over again and smiled. "She has pretty eyes for a half-nigger baby," the overseer said. Hannah's heart stopped. Her sweet Rose was alive. "No!" Hannah screamed. "Go back to sleep, Rose, please," she pleaded. Her worst nightmare had come true. Her baby, her daughter, was in the hands of white men. One day when poor Rose was skipping around the other slaves, humming and learning the work that would be her life, a white man would snatch her and drag her to these woods. They would take that innocent hum and skip from her. Like thieves, they would take what was most precious to someone and throw it away like trash. The overseer set Rose down. He propped her up against a tree so she could see her mother. "Watch this, Rose Williams," the overseer said. Hannah's poor heart raced. She knew this was it. The overseer was going to kill her. The first sight Rose would see of her mother would be her being murdered. The white man walked over to Hannah, a sick smile on his pale, dirty face. "I could take you back to the big house, have Master William's doctors treat you, but where's the fun in that?" the overseer hissed. Hannah was too weak to fight. She had lost too much blood. She could barely keep her eyes open. She doubted she would make it to Master William's house even if she was carried there. Hannah stared at Rose and smiled. No matter what this man did to her, she would die staring at her baby's sweet face. Her Rose, the single strand of beauty in her young, short life. "Stop smiling, nigger," the overseer shouted. He struck Hannah hard on her head. Hannah fell back and lost consciousness. Her smile never left her face. Hannah died with the image of Rose in her heart. But her death did not stop the overseer from tying a rope around her neck and hanging her from a tree. The cut umbilical cord dangled between Hannah's thin legs. All was silent for a moment, as if the woods marked the passing of Hannah the hummingbird. Then, out of the darkness, a single cry broke the stillness and shattered the silence. It was the cry of a newborn, the cry of Rose, as she watched the corpse of her mother swinging in the soft night breeze. Rose. I enjoyed the summer days, despite the sweltering heat on the Mississippi plantation. I enjoyed sitting on Master William's porch, sipping iced lemonade. The stares I got from the slaves working in the fields were horrible. They saw me, the daughter of the massa, and thought I was living some life far above theirs. They hated me just as they hated him. If only they knew how badly I wished for the safety of the shacks they lived in. The slaves in the field had a sort of freedom I would never know. Some nights, as I lay in my bed praying my father wouldn't sneak in and rape me, I listened to the singing and laughter coming from the slave shacks. They didn't know that this sweet iced lemonade I sipped was laced with some strange white concoction. It tasted so vile that the only way to drink it was to mix it with sugar. It was poison, a mistress's way of ensuring we couldn't bear her husband's children. Hours after drinking it, I would be so sick I could barely move. Yet, I still had to perform my duties and serve the massa's house. The darker-skinned slaves wanted to be me. They wanted the life they thought I had. But all I wanted was to be them, to have the small freedoms the shacks provided. They didn't see the scarf I wore around my neck in this blistering heat, nor the horrible scar it hid. I hate to tell this story, dear diary, but maybe you'll understand me better after you've heard it. I never knew my mother. I've only heard stories about her. The day I was born, my mother died. The overseer hung her from a tree in those cursed woods. I was raised by Big Mary. She was the only mother I ever knew. Big Mary breastfed me and several other slave children. She taught us how to navigate life in the house, how to avoid the prying eyes of the white men who came and went from Massa Williams' home. Big Mary was an elder here. She carried the stories of so many slaves who had walked these halls or worked in the fields. She knew about my mother. She made it her duty to ensure I knew where I came from. She told me about the night I was born, the night the overseer brought me to Massa Williams. I was wrapped in my mother's old bloody blanket. Big Mary said she could tell by the look on the overseer's face that he had killed my mama. Massa Williams took one look at me, his newborn slave child. There was no love in his eyes, no ties of kinship. I was just another piece of property to him. He waved the overseer away, and I was handed to Big Mary. To Massa Williams, I was nothing. Within weeks, he had forgotten he had raped my young mother in the dark, dreadful woods that became her tomb. I often wondered how many of us were the daughters and sons of Massa Williams. Growing up in the big house was a nightmare. Nearly every week, Massa Williams would stumble drunk into the slave quarters. It was no more than a glorified doghouse. He would pull one of the girls into the hall and have his way with her. I got used to hearing their screams, the sounds of them being beaten into submission. As I grew older, I could no longer sleep. I lay awake every night, wondering if it would be my turn. If tonight, Massa Williams would sneak into my room and take me, his own daughter, into that dark hall. I feared he might drag me into the woods as he had done with my mother. Even when I finally managed to sleep, the faintest creak of the floorboards would wake me, my heart racing. Hummingbird. A man spoke softly in the hallway. My heart pounded like it was trying to escape my chest. I looked around for Big Mary. She was sitting up in her bed, staring at me, her eyes wide with fear. Sweet hummingbird, hum me a song, the man whispered again. The stench of alcohol clung to him, heavy and suffocating. He was coming for me. Big Mary, I whispered, my voice trembling. Big Mary shook her head, her face pale with helplessness. She wasn't going to help me. I don't think she could, even if she wanted to. It's rare for a slave woman to grow old. The fact that Big Mary had survived this long meant she had learned to keep her mouth shut and her eyes closed. Massa Williams had never seemed to get over my mother. The entire plantation still talked about her. They hummed in remembrance of her, the way she used to hum. She was truly something special. I didn't mean for you to hang in that tray, hummingbird. The man whispered, his words slurred. Come to bed, Mr. Williams, his wife pleaded from down the hall. It was rare for Mistress Elizabeth to intervene when her husband wanted to partake of his property. You're just upset that I liked hummingbird more than you, Massa Williams sneered. Everyone heard Mistress Elizabeth's sharp inhale. His words had cut her deeply. Not only had he preferred a black slave woman over his white wife, but he had loved her. Loved her in the twisted, vile way a man like him could love. A woman he raped. A woman he let hang in the woods where he had taken her. If that was his idea of love, what did that mean for his wife? Massa Williams slowly pushed open the door to the slave quarters. Hum for me, hummingbird. Your master commands it, he barked, his voice thick with brandy. He loved to sit on his porch and drink his liquor. I liked to think it was his way of coping with his demons. A man as vile as him had to be haunted by the souls of the slaves whose lives he'd destroyed. If there was a hell, I figured it had a white man like Massa Williams sitting on the devil's throne. Mistress Elizabeth grabbed his arm. "Come now, husband. Let's get back to bed," she begged. Massa Williams spun around and struck her across the face. She crumpled to the ground, her pale hand trembling as she clutched her cheek. "Leave me be, woman," he shouted. His gaze swept over the room, landing on the terrified faces of the slave girls. He smiled when he saw me. "There you are, hummingbird," he said gleefully. They always said I looked like my mother, that I had her eyes. If my skin were a few shades darker, they wouldn't be able to tell us apart. Us lighter-skinned slaves were the daughters and sons of white men who dragged slave girls into the woods. We were the children of pain. I pulled the thin, stained blanket over my head, praying he wouldn't see me. "Massa Williams, that there's Rose. She is of your flesh and blood," Big Mary said, her voice trembling with desperation. She was trying to dissuade him, trying to remind him that I was his daughter. "I ain't got no nigger, baby," Massa Williams snapped, backhanding Big Mary. She stumbled but didn't fall. "I'm sorry, Massa," Big Mary murmured, her voice filled with shame. She looked at me for a moment before turning away. I will never forget the shame in her eyes. She had raised us, but she could do nothing but watch as we were violated and abused. Massa Williams stormed over to me and ripped the filthy blanket off my trembling body. "Come here, hummingbird," he said. Mistress Elizabeth stood and glared at me, her cold blue eyes filled with nothing but anger and hate. It was as if I were to blame for this, for the choices her husband made. She rubbed her red, swollen cheek before turning and leaving the room. I couldn't shake the dread that her hateful glare left behind. Her hatred scared me more than the groping hands of the white men. Mistress Elizabeth ruled over the house slaves with an iron fist, cruel and cold, twice as brutal as the men. Whatever small comfort I'd had in being a child slave was gone now. I felt Massa Williams' hand on my leg. Instinctively, I kicked at him. "You little," he cursed, striking me hard across the cheek. Pain erupted through my face as I groaned. Whatever fight I had fled my body. Warm blood dripped from my nose as my limbs grew heavy. I felt as though my body suddenly weighed 1,000 pounds, dragging me down into despair. "You kick me again, and you'll hang like your mother," Massa Williams growled. He grabbed me, yanking me from my ruined, decaying bed as if I weighed nothing. I suppose I was nothing to him, just another possession. "Big Mary!" I screamed, my voice cracking. I looked around desperately for the only mother I'd ever known, but Big Mary sat silent, her face hidden from me, her shame palpable. I don't know why I called her name. There was nothing she could do to save me. Still, it was instinct. She was my mama, at least in my heart. I knew this day would come. All of us did. And I knew it would happen again and again for the rest of my life. The first time was always the worst. Massa Williams dragged me into the hallway and stopped, staring at me. I wasn't sure if he saw me or my mother in that moment. His rough, dirty fingers brushed against my cheek. "You were my favorite," he whispered, almost tenderly, before his hands tore the thin gown from my body. "Please, Father," I begged, tears streaming down my face. "I ain't got no nigger daughter," Massa Williams spat, slapping me so hard my vision blurred. The world spun around me, and I felt the darkness creeping in. I wondered if this was what my mother had felt before she died, if she too had seen the light fading into the void. Massa Williams forced my legs apart, his callous hands rough and invasive. "You've been untouched," he said, smiling cruelly. Being the daughter of the Massa had offered me a sliver of protection. The other white men feared him enough not to mishandle me too much. But now, that fragile shield had shattered. I wanted to close my eyes, to sink into the darkness and escape. But then I felt it, the piercing weight of someone's gaze. I turned my head and saw Mistress Elizabeth sitting in the dark hallway, nursing her bruised cheek. She was staring at me with pure hatred. I screamed as Massa Williams thrust himself into me. The pain tore through me, unbearable. Sobs racked my body, but my thoughts drifted to my mother. The blue-eyed monster who had fathered me had done this to her, too. And now, here I was, suffering the same fate at the hands of the man whose hateful seed had created me. "Shut your mouth, slave!" Massa Williams bellowed, striking me again. The blow sent me spiraling into unconsciousness. Strange how I welcomed it, how being knocked out felt like mercy. Now as I write this, my worn candle flickers, casting shadows across this fragile page. My duties still await me, and I can't afford to linger too long in the past. But if you thought what my father did to me was terrible, you don't know the scorn of a woman. I'll tell you about Mistress Elizabeth tomorrow. Until then, diary. The tree. I have a love-hate relationship with this tree. It was old and gnarled, standing on this plantation for more years than the oldest slave could count. This tree had carried the bodies of so many people, hanging from its ancient branches. It almost seemed like black bodies were a part of it. I hung from this tree once, years ago. I couldn't help but touch the horrible scar that covered my neck. I sighed deeply and stared at the tree as I sipped the poison that Mistress Elizabeth made for me. I guess I have to tell this story as well, dear diary. Bear with me. This was as close to freedom as I had ever come. I fear I will never taste it again until I'm too old to serve in Massa's house. When that day comes, he will take me out here, just as he had done with Big Mary, and hang me from this tree. Seeing Big Mary hanging here broke my heart. I didn't think my heart was capable of breaking anymore. Being a slave is just one heartbreak after another. Eventually, your heart just hardens. Big Mary had served Massa Williams since he was a child. She had breastfed and cared for him. And her reward? To be hung from this very tree when her body was too old to be of use anymore. Almost every person on this plantation had been cared for by Big Mary. Death was the only freedom we could look forward to. Though my heart broke for her, I was happy she was finally free. The next morning, I woke in my bed. My body ached. Blood had dried between my thighs. I could barely move. I felt like someone had rammed a stick inside of me and cut me open. My stomach ached. I wondered if this was how my mother had felt when Massa Williams took her into the woods. I didn't want to move. It even hurt to breathe. "Get up, harlot. The mistress is waiting for you out back," one of the overseers said. I tried to sit up, but a wave of pain shot through my body. I was afraid. I knew the mistress wouldn't care that I'd been beaten so badly I could barely walk. I took a deep breath and slowly sat up. I couldn't help the scream of pain that erupted from my lips. I sobbed in agony. "Come, child," a familiar, soft voice said. I wanted to smile, but I couldn't. Even that simple act hurt. It was Big Mary, my surrogate mother, who helped me to my feet. Fresh blood dripped down my legs. My movement must have reopened the many wounds and tears between my thighs. Every breath felt like I was breathing fire. "Hurry now, nigger," the overseer growled. He eyed Big Mary, but did not intervene. The walk through the big house was a walk of shame. Everyone knew what had happened to me last night. I could see the pity in the other slaves' eyes and the disgust in the eyes of the white men. I was still processing what had happened. My father, the man who owned me, the man I was a slave for, the same man who had stolen my mother from her bed and raped her in the woods, had taken me from my bed and brutalized me. I prayed I was not pregnant. We finally made it to the back. The sunlight stung my swollen eyes. "Let the whore go, Big Mary," Mistress Elizabeth said. Big Mary hesitated for a moment, then backed away from me. I didn't want to fall, but I could feel my knees buckle. I winced in pain as I lifted my head. Mistress Elizabeth stood beside a huge, old gnarled tree. This tree looked more like a monster than a tree, like a creature eager for blood. Its branches were bare, reaching for the sky, as if it had escaped from hell. The mistress held a rope in her hands. She was a small woman, her hair thin and blonde. She had to be at least 10 years younger than her husband. "Your mother bewitched my husband, and so have you," Mistress Elizabeth began. I took a shaky step forward and fell hard onto the old wooden porch. Pain exploded through my body, but I bit my lip to keep from screaming. I knew I was going to die today. This tree was the killing tree. So many slaves had hung and rotted on its withered branches. The tree probably craved our blood. "As Christians, we don't tolerate witches, especially nigger ones who curse us with your African magic," the mistress finished. I couldn't help the laugh that escaped my swollen lips. I wasn't a witch, nor did I know anything about Africa. I had been raised in the big house with the other house slaves. I knew nothing about being African. All I knew was slavery and pain. "The nigger witch mocks us," the mistress growled. She nodded at an overseer. He walked over and kicked me hard in my already bruised ribs. I heard something crack and screamed. The pain was unbearable. I started coughing. Dark red blood dripped from my mouth. I wanted to die. I welcomed it. The tree would feast on my life today. I did not fear it. I would finally be free. The only freedom for a slave is death. Big Mary had told me that once. She was right. "Don't let her pass out. Take her to the tree," the mistress commanded. The dirty overseer nodded. He slapped me hard across my swollen face, staring at me in disgust. After a moment, he grabbed my wrist and dragged me roughly down the back porch steps, leaving me in front of the tree. The mistress towered over me, gripping the rope in her hands. She smiled wickedly. "You will hang just like your mother," she said. She bent down and tied the rope tightly around my neck. This was it. I was going to die. I wasn't sad. I was looking forward to meeting my mother, to hearing her hum, to being free with her. I closed my eyes. I didn't want to see this world anymore. I wondered what my mother looked like, if she would recognize me. The mistress threw the rope over a thick branch and pointed at the overseer. He pulled hard on the other end. I felt the rope tighten, cutting into my flesh. My heart raced as my feet left the ground. Fire spread through my neck. I couldn't breathe. Freedom, here I come. I tried to whisper. My lips moved, but no sound came out. My vision blurred. I was so excited. I should have been afraid of death. I should have been begging for my life. But I wasn't. What could be worse than the hell that was my life? What could be worse than being a slave in the big house? Worse than being raped by your own father, the man who owned you. Every night I could remember was filled with the screams of slave women echoing through the halls, crying out as they were violated. If there was a hell, it could not be worse than my life. Hot blood dripped down my neck. The rope had cut deep into my flesh. "Cut her down now!" I heard a voice boom. Before I could register what was happening, I landed hard on the ground. Pain shot through my broken body, but I barely felt it. I was so close. I could see freedom. I could feel death's cold hand reaching for my soul. "Big Mary, take her in. She better not die or you will hang," a man shouted. "Yes, massa," Big Mary replied. It was my father. I wasn't sure if he had saved me out of some twisted sense of fatherly love, out of pride, or simply because I reminded him too much of my mother. Maybe he wanted to rape me again while thinking of her. "I was going to be free," I whispered as Big Mary gently picked me up. Then everything went dark. When I woke, I was in a cold, dimly lit room. Chains bound me to a stone slab. A fire burned softly beside me, casting flickering shadows across the walls. My head throbbed. My entire body ached. My neck felt as if someone had tried to saw it off. "She is awake, mistress," a woman said. I tried to turn my head toward the voice, but a sharp pain shot through me, nearly dragging me back into unconsciousness. "Please don't try to move," the voice said again. It was a slave woman, elderly. I wondered what she was doing here. "I may not be able to kill you, but I'll make you wish I did," Mistress Elizabeth said. Her pale face loomed above me, her cold blue eyes gleaming eerily in the firelight. She looked like the devil's mistress. I was afraid. What more could she do to me? I had already been raped. I had already hung from a tree. I was already broken. Mistress Elizabeth nodded to the older woman, who hesitated for a moment before walking toward the fire. I couldn't see what she was doing. "I will make you less desirable to my husband. Do you understand me? You defile our white genes. You are an abomination that should have never been allowed to live," the mistress growled. She grabbed a thin knife, rusted, its blade notched as if it had been used to hack at something hard. I locked eyes with her. What is she going to do to me? She pressed the tip of the dull blade right above my left eye, dragging it slowly down the bridge of my nose and across my lips. The metal was ice cold against my skin. I shivered. She stopped at my wounds, then grabbed the ragged slave dress clinging to my battered body and tore it down to my waist, exposing my small breasts. "I don't understand what men see in animals," she whispered. She ran the blade around my dark nipples, her lips curling in disgust. "Fucking you is no different than fucking a pig. You're just as filthy and just as inhuman." She held out her hand, and the elder slave woman passed her a long metal rod. The tip glowed red hot, smoke curling from its end. The heat radiated toward me, and my body tensed involuntarily. The mistress smiled at the fear in my eyes. she was enjoying this. She pressed the burning tip against my nipple. I heard it before I felt it. A hiss, flesh sizzling. The sharp, putrid scent of burning skin filled my nostrils. Then the pain hit. I screamed. I didn't think my broken body could take any more, but I was wrong. "Hum something now," the mistress mocked. She pulled the iron away. Bits of my skin tore off with it, sizzling in the air before dropping into the fire. I clenched my teeth, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I closed my eyes and thought of my mother. I was older now than she had been when she died. I didn't even know what she looked like. I could only picture an ebony-skinned little girl humming and dancing through the cotton fields. I screamed again as the mistress pressed the hot iron against my other nipple. The stench of my own burning flesh made me gag. The mistress leaned down and stroked my long, curly black hair, her touch almost gentle. "This is far from over, Rose," she whispered. She pulled the iron away and plunged it into a cauldron of stale water. The water hissed as it cooled the metal, bits of my flesh floating to the surface. The mistress took a step back, looking me over as if deciding where to torture me next. She nodded to herself, satisfied, then turned and left me on the cold stone slab to rot. Sweet Mississippi Lemonade. It has been a few days since I last wrote Dear Diary. My heart is too heavy. Juno is dead. She was hung today, my sister in suffering, my only true friend in this cursed house. Like me, she was the daughter of a white man. Like me, she was hated for it. Her body still swings from the gnarled branch of that ancient tree, the same tree Mistress tried to hang me from. I miss her so much. She was one of the few bright spots in this world of darkness. I don't know how much more of this I could take. But at least my sweet Juno is free now. No longer a slave. No longer a girl born under the misfortune of being half Negro, half white. I hope, wherever she is, she knows she was loved. Being the daughter of a white man means we are despised by all. The men who created us beat and rape us. White society calls us abominations, creatures with defiled blood. The darker-skinned slaves in the fields hate us just as much. They think we live a life of luxury because we serve in the big house. They do not see the horror we endure. Juno and I used to listen to the songs the field slaves sang. We imagined ourselves among them, part of something, part of anything. But the glares they gave us, the way their eyes burned with resentment, shattered our already fragile hearts. Enough of that diary. There is still so much to tell. The days after Mistress hung and tortured me passed slowly. Despite my wounds, I still had to perform my duties, still had to feel the sting of the overseer's whip. Perhaps I should thank Mistress. My face and body were so beaten and swollen that the white men no longer wanted to touch me. I was spared their groping hands, their nightly violations. But terror still filled the night. White men slithered into our broken-down slave quarters, pulling girls from their beds. Their screams of agony echoed through the big house. Did the field slaves hear them? Or were they too busy hiding their daughters from the white men who lurked in the woods? Every day that I healed, Mistress seemed to hate me more. She glared as I worked. I found needles and rocks hidden in my food. I knew they came from her. Rose. Massa Williams called my name. I stopped what I was doing and ran to him. To delay, to hesitate, meant hanging from that dreaded tree. Mistress followed behind me, determined to see what her husband wanted with me. "Yes, Massa Williams?" I said. He smiled as he looked at me, even in my bruised and battered state. I knew what he saw. Not his daughter, not a slave. He saw my mother. Massa Williams was an old man now. Like most wicked men, the conscience he had beaten into submission in his youth had begun to rise with age. Of all the evil he had done, something about my mother haunted him. And oh diary, I was torn between hatred and love. I hated him for his cruelty, for raping me, for being a vile slaver. But I could not help but love him too, because he was my father. I wondered, did he feel the same? Was he forced to love me in his own twisted way? Did some inescapable biological thread tie him to me, despite my Negro blood? Was that why he kept Mistress from hanging me? "Ah, hummingbird," Massa Williams murmured. As I stood before him, I did not meet his eyes. My head remained bowed, my body trembling, but not from fear. I stood before the man who had tormented me, the man who had tormented my mother, the man who owned me as he had once owned her, the man responsible for all the pain and suffering I had known in this world. I wanted to hurt him. I surprised myself with the strength of that feeling. Normally, I bowed and scraped, did my best to go unnoticed. I kept my head down and worked, hoping to avoid his gaze. But after Mistress had burned off my nipples, something inside me had changed. Massa Williams turned his gaze to Mistress Elizabeth. "Why are you here, woman? I did not call you," he growled. Mistress Elizabeth lowered her head. Her pale cheeks flushed red with rage and embarrassment. Poor woman. She was little more than a slave herself. Like every soul on this plantation, she existed only to please him. She was as much his property as I was. Every day, she was reminded of her place in this house. Every day, he showed her how low she truly stood in his eyes. "I was just checking on you, dear," she replied. Like me, she kept her gaze to the floor. And in that moment, she was my equal. But she was too arrogant to see it. "I don't need you. Go find something to do besides bother me, woman," Massa Williams snapped. Mistress Elizabeth nodded and quickly left, but I felt the heat of her hatred seething off her. Massa Williams watched her leave, his eyes filled with contempt. "Rose," he said. I stiffened. He had never called me by my name before. I was always Hummingbird. "Yes, Massa," I answered softly, keeping my eyes trained on the old wooden floor. "Come here," he commanded. I took a deep breath to steady my racing heart and stepped forward. He patted his lap. He wanted me to sit. I sighed, but did as I was bid. With his old tobacco-stained fingers, he brushed my long, curly hair from my face, studying me intently. I wondered what he was searching for. Did he see me, or did he only see my mother? "Hum something for me, Rose," Massa Williams murmured. I didn't like to hum. Humming made me think of my mother, of her pain as she died in the woods after bringing me into this world. I wondered if she had hummed to me in those final moments, if she had held me against her chest and sang before death claimed her. Still, I nodded and obeyed. I didn't know what I was humming. I closed my eyes and let the melody flow from deep within me, something soft and aching. I imagined my mother dancing in the cotton fields, humming as she moved beneath the hot southern sun. In my mind, she was a darker-skinned version of myself. Massa Williams closed his eyes as he listened, stroking my hair with his withered fingers. "You know, Rose, I'm dying," he said suddenly. He searched my face, hoping to find some flicker of emotion. He found nothing. "Doctor says I maybe have months. He called it Noma. Some kind of sickness eating me alive," he continued. Again he searched my eyes. Again, all he found was cold emptiness. The arrogance of this man to think I would care. I and the rest of the slaves would thank God and celebrate when this monster finally drew his last breath. Master Williams exhaled heavily, as if my silence had finally given him his answer. "I never thought my only child would be a nigger," Master Williams sighed. He shook his head, lost in thought. "A man starts seeing things differently when he's at the end of his rope. I won't leave you with nothing, you hear?" A fit of coughing racked his body. His skin, once firm and commanding, now hung loose and pale, drenched in sweat. He had lost so much weight. Mistress Elizabeth rushed back in, her presence sharp and unwelcome. She turned to me with a snap of her fingers. "Wait for me on the front porch," she ordered. I obeyed without a word. I locked the front porch. From there I could see the cotton fields stretch endlessly beneath the burning sun. I could hear the dark-skinned field slaves singing as they worked. I admired them. Despite our shared bondage, they had something we in the house had lost, each other. They were not broken the way we were. They had built a world for themselves within the chains, a culture, a community. They were my mother's people. How I longed to be among them. But I knew the truth. They hated me just as much as they hated the massa. To them, I was a reminder of his cruelty, of what he had taken from their mothers, their sisters, their daughters. I sighed and listened to their voices rising with the wind. "I don't know what you think you're doing, you little whore." Mistress Elizabeth's high-pitched voice tore through my thoughts. I didn't turn to her. I just kept staring at the fields, longing for a life I would never have. At least out there, I wouldn't have to deal with her. I could live the life I was meant to live. A slave, yes, but maybe one with a husband. Maybe someone to share the burden. Maybe even love. Love on a plantation seemed as forbidden as freedom itself. All we had were our thoughts and dreams, and even those they tried to chain. The mistress struck the back of my head, hard. I caught myself before I hit the porch floor. "You will listen when I speak, slave," she screeched. I turned my gaze to her and nodded. "Yes, mistress." A cruel smile curled her lips. Age had begun to claim her, though she was younger than Massa. The years had not been kind. "You may be my husband's nigger. Lord knows he can't keep his prick out of you people," she spat. Even the thought that I might be her stepdaughter seemed to disgust her. "He won't have a nigger bloodline. You hear me?" She thrust a cup into my hands. The ice clinked inside, the pale yellow liquid sloshing gently. It looked like lemonade. My hands trembled as I took it. I knew better than to think she was offering me kindness. There was something in that drink. Something meant to hurt me. "Drink it," she ordered. I hesitated. She nodded to the overseer standing nearby. Before I could react, the sting of the whip sliced across my back. I screamed, falling forward, spilling some of the lemonade. "Drink it," she snarled. Tears blurred my vision as I nodded and took a small sip. The bitterness hit me first, sharp and foul, like rotting piss beneath the surface of weak sweetness. She nodded again at the overseer. The whip cracked, striking just under my left arm. I gasped as the pain tore through me, blood seeping into my filthy rags. My hands shook as I forced another sip down my throat. I gagged. "This will rot your womb," the mistress declared. "The Williams bloodline will be pure and white." I almost laughed. What bloodline? As far as Massa knew, I was his only child. Mistress Elizabeth had not given him any. And I surely didn't want to bear a white man's child, least of all his. Maybe, in her own twisted way, she was doing me a favor. No other white man dared touch me because I belonged to Massa Williams. But when he died, they would come for me. I didn't want to end up like my mother, giving birth alone in the woods, afraid, bleeding into the earth, only to have her baby stolen and murdered. I took a long, deep gulp of the poison. Mistress Elizabeth's lips curled with satisfaction as I swallowed it down. "Every morning, before you start your labors, you will drink this." I nodded weakly. "Yes, mistress." The aftertaste lingered, thick and foul. My back burned, my ribs ached, but I forced myself to sit still. The thick fabric of my rags was already stiffening with blood, but at least it had slowed the bleeding. "Sit here and let the potion rot your foul womb," she sneered. "Yes, mistress," I whispered. She glared at me one last time before turning and disappearing back inside. I clutched my ribs, my breath shallow. I turned my gaze back to the fields, watching the dark figures moving among the cotton, their voices rising like prayers to a God who never answered. It didn't take long for the poison to take effect. My head swam, my stomach twisted. Nausea clawed up my throat. I was afraid to throw up. If I did, she might have the overseer whip me to death. Every time bile rose, I forced it back down. I hoped the poison did more than rot my womb. I hoped it killed me. Massa Williams dies. "Wake up, Rose!" A frantic voice shook me from my restless sleep. I felt rough hands gripping my leg, shaking me urgently. My body ached, my ribs, my back, my stomach. The poison the mistress forced me to drink every morning still clung to my insides, leaving me weak and nauseous. "They coming for you, Rose! Wake up, girl!" I forced my heavy eyes open, my mind sluggish. A slave girl hovered over me, fear shining in her dark eyes. Shouting echoed from the hallway, Mistress Elizabeth's voice shrill and desperate. "I don't want that little nigger near him," she screeched. A man's voice answered, deep and commanding. "This is your husband's house, and he wants to see her before he passes. I won't deny my brother his dying wish because of his jealous wife." My heart lurched. Were they talking about me? Through the fog in my mind, I remembered Massa Williams was sick, dying. The door to the slave quarters burst open. "Rose, come here." A middle-aged white man stood in the doorway. I wiped my eyes, staring at him. He looked like Massa Williams, same sharp nose, same pale skin, same piercing blue eyes. He scanned the dim room, searching for someone. Slowly, I pushed myself up, ignoring the pain in my limbs. I limped toward him, my breath shallow. "Yes, Massa?" I murmured. Rough fingers seized my chin, tilting my face up to his. He studied me, eyes narrowing, lips pressing into a tight line. "You're definitely his daughter," he muttered. The iron grip on my chin loosened. His stern expression softened. "You look like my mother. Well, our mother," he said almost to himself. Behind him, Mistress Elizabeth bristled, her face twisted in rage, red blotches creeping up her neck. "She is a nigger, nothing more," she spat. "How dare you insinuate she is the daughter of my husband?" The man turned sharply, his gaze slicing into her. She flinched. He held out his hand to me. "Come." I hesitated, then placed my hand in his. His fingers curled around mine, firm but not cruel. He nodded, then led me into the dark hallway. I swallowed hard as we passed that spot, the place where just months ago Massa Williams had beaten me, forced himself on me. I shuddered and glanced back. Mistress Elizabeth stood in the shadows, her eyes burning with silent fury. I remembered that look, how she had watched, hidden in the darkness, saying nothing as I was brutalized. The man stopped in front of Massa Williams' door. "He wanted to see you," he said. I nodded. He pushed the door open. "I will not have her in there alone," Mistress Elizabeth snapped, trying to shove past me. The man stepped between us, stopping her with a single glare. "This is your husband's house, woman. You own nothing. Be mindful of that." His voice was calm, but there was a warning beneath it. Mistress Elizabeth's face reddened. She stepped back. I saw the truth settle behind her eyes, an ugly, bitter truth. She was powerless. This was a white man's world. White women were just a means to extend the white race, nothing more. "Is that you, Rose?" The weak, rasping voice pulled my attention. I turned toward the bed. Massa Williams lay there, sunken into the mattress, his once powerful frame reduced to little more than bones and skin. His breath rattled. "Yes, Massa," I whispered. The man beside me leaned down, his voice low in my ear. "He is dying. Call him father." I didn't want to call this vile man father. I had never thought of him as my father. I knew he was, but the thought of calling the man that raped both my mother and me father was sickening. "Yes, Massa," I replied. The door clicked shut behind me. "Rose?" Massa Williams called weakly. My heart pounded as I hesitated before stepping toward his bed. "Yes, father." I forced the word out, the taste of it bitter on my tongue. He sighed, sinking deeper into the soiled sheets. The room was dimly lit with flickering candles. The thick scent of incense clung to the air, a feeble attempt to mask the overwhelming stench of death and decay. He was too sick to rise, too weak to even relieve himself properly. I smiled as I drew closer, not out of love, but satisfaction. Seeing him lying in his own filth, helpless and rotting, filled me with a dark sense of justice. Massa Williams smiled back at me, mistaking my expression for affection. Poor, pitiful fool. His frail, trembling hand reached for mine, his fingers crusted with blood and excrement. "I loved your mother, Rose, as strange as that may be, considering she was one of my niggers," Massa Williams began. He was interrupted by a violent fit of coughing, his frail body shuddering under the weight of his sickness. "Everything all right in there?" The mistress's shrill voice pierced through the door. Massa Williams shook his graying head. "I hate that woman," he gasped. The coughing finally subsided, and with what little strength he had left, he shouted, "Leave me be!" A frustrated sigh came from the other side of the door, followed by the sound of the older white man leading the mistress away. Massa Williams turned his weary eyes back to me. "I know I haven't been much of a father," he began. I couldn't let him finish. He was never a father to me. He was my massa, and that was all. I didn't know where this rage came from. I wanted to kill him. I knew I would never get another moment like this. He was old and weak, and I was alone in a room with him at his request. I grabbed one of his dirty pillows and placed it over his head, covering his mouth. He tried to shout, but it was muffled by the pillow. I pressed down as hard as I could. Despite my many injuries, my rage gave me strength. "How dare you?" I said, my voice cracking with pain and anger. I could feel Massa Williams squirm beneath the pillow. His old dirty hands flailed as he tried to fight. I pressed harder. "You raped my mother," I said. Tears rolled down my cheeks as I imagined her hanging from a tree in the woods. "You raped me not 5 feet from your very door," I said. Flashes of that night played in my mind. "I am your slave, your house Negro. I have never been your daughter," I said. My arms shook as I pressed down. I was getting weak. My body was still broken. The wound on my ribs from the overseer's whip had opened back up. Blood soaked my old and torn nightgown. "Die and go to hell where you belong," I said. As I continued to press down on the pillow, Massa Williams finally stopped fighting. He lay still. My heart pounded so hard in my chest I could barely breathe. Was he finally dead? Could my mother's soul finally rest? I was afraid to remove the pillow. I thought he would rise up like the vile creature he was and kill me. I took a deep, shuddering breath and slowly lifted the pillow from his face. Massa Williams was dead. He looked peaceful. I had never realized how much I truly looked like him until now. I had spent my entire life too afraid to look him in the face. I was nearly this man's twin. I could see myself in him, something he could never do with me. I straightened his hair and placed the pillow under his head. I was lightheaded. I sat in the chair next to his bed and cried. I couldn't believe he was truly dead. I had avenged my mother and so many others. In the end, it seemed my father had given me the best gift he was capable of giving. I was able to take his life, to end generations of pain. I was still very much a slave. I knew my life would get much harder, but at least he was dead. I don't know how long I sat in the room alone with Massa Williams' corpse. I listened to the steady drip of my blood from my reopened wound. "You killed him, you harlot!" The shrill voice of the mistress brought me back to reality. I was not safe. She pointed her long, aging finger at me. "Hang this murdering nigger from the tree!" she shouted. To my surprise, none of the overseers moved to apprehend me. "Did you not hear me?" the mistress screamed at them. The older white man, who had been kinder to me throughout this ordeal, walked into the room. He ignored the mistress's screaming and walked right over to Massa Williams. He checked for a pulse and sighed. Then he stared at me. He took in my tear-stained, scared face and sighed again. "Take her back to the slave quarters," he ordered. I was relieved. He did not believe that I could have killed Massa Williams. Who would? I was a frail, tiny woman who had been beaten so badly I could barely walk. Besides, Massa Williams was already dying. He had sent for me on his deathbed. Everyone knew these were his last moments. "What are you doing? She killed him!" the mistress screamed. The older man shook his head. "Look at her, Elizabeth. Between that foul poison you give her and the beatings, do you think she is capable of killing my brother?" the older white man asked. Elizabeth spat in my face as I was led past her. "She was not his daughter. He will never have a nigger bloodline," Elizabeth shot back. Massa William's brother sighed deeply and placed his hand on his dead brother's chest. He sat there a moment, quietly. I wondered what he was thinking. Was he reliving some fond memory of his older brother? I doubted they were close. I had never seen him here before. He made his choice, Elizabeth. You don't have to like it or accept it, but that slave is his daughter, and thus my niece. You will not harm her anymore, he said calmly. I was returned to the slave quarters. The other slave girls sat up as soon as they saw me enter. The look of relief on their faces was touching. They cared for me. We were the only family we had. Times like this, I missed Juno. She was buried in a pit with all the other murdered slaves. The whites cared so little about us that even in death, they did what they could to prevent us from reaching heaven. If God was white and he had a heaven, I didn't want to go there. I had my fill of white men. In death, I just wanted the peace of black nothingness. I didn't want to pick cotton in some white god's fields. Is it true? One of the slave girls asked. I nodded. Nothing else needed to be said. They all knew what I had done. Given the chance, they would have done it too. Henry. It has been a few days since I have been able to write diary. Ever since I ended Massa William's life, the plantation has been busy. Massa William's brother, Henry, took over. Things are going to be different now that Massa Henry is in charge. He is still a slave owner, but not as cold as Massa Williams was. The best way to catch you up is to start the day after I killed my father, Massa Williams. I was exhausted as I lay in my bed, my heart just as tired as my worn and beaten body. But I could not sleep. I had killed Massa Williams, and I was scared. What if someone found out? I would surely hang from the killing tree. But no one saw me. I was sure of it. Despite Massa Williams deserving to die, something in my soul felt wrong. I had never taken a life before. Maybe because he was my father? I could not pinpoint where I was wrong for killing him, but I knew one thing for certain. Despite his death, I would never be free of him. The night seemed to slip away. Before I knew it, the overseers were ringing the bells, calling us to work. Things were different. I could feel it. The other house slaves stared at me like I was a dangerous animal. I was a murderer in their eyes. I could not understand this. The white men and Massa Williams had beaten and raped all of them, yet somehow I was the villain for killing one of our enslavers. Then again, I was not the same either. We were ordered to prepare the house for a funeral. Massa Williams' friends and family from all over would be coming to say their final goodbyes. This was horrible news for us. We knew that with more white men around came more abuse and rape. "Rose," I heard a voice call out. My heart raced. It was never a good thing when an overseer called you. We were not human to them. We were property that they could do with as they wished. "Massa Henry wants you," the old haggard overseer said. I hated this overseer. He was crueler than the others. He was the one that hung Juno from the killing tree. I could still see her face as they strung her up, her eyes bulging as they pulled the rope. I steadied myself. I did not know what Massa Henry wanted. It had been a couple of days since I had killed Massa Williams. Did he know? I hurried down the old, decaying hallway and stopped at his door. I tried to steady the pounding of my heart. I didn't want him to know I was nervous. I took a deep breath and softly knocked. "Rose?" Massa Henry asked. I stepped into what used to be Massa Williams' room. I could not help but remember him dying on the bed that was once in the corner, the cold look in his eyes as I placed the dirty pillow over his face. "Rose," Massa Henry said again. I sighed, trying not to look where Massa Williams once lay. "Yes, Massa," I replied. Massa Henry studied my face. He was not as cold as Massa Williams, but I could not go as far as calling him a good man. He owned me. How could anyone who owns another human be good? "I can't have you in the house anymore," Massa Henry started. I didn't know how to take this. My entire life, I had been a house slave. All I knew was this house. Even with all its horrors, the white men creeping in the halls, trying to decide which slave girl to pull from her bed, this was home. "I am constantly reminded that you are my niece, but you're also a Negro. You're a mistake my brother made," Massa Henry said. He looked me in the eyes. "Do you understand this, Rose?" Massa Henry asked. I suppose this was his way of saying he cared without actually saying it. He was conflicted. I was his brother's Negro daughter. He didn't know what to do with me. All I could do was nod. I had no choice in where I went. "I will instruct the overseers not to touch you. This is all I can do for you, Rose. Just keep your head down and do your work," Massa Henry said. Again, I nodded. Massa Henry looked at me one last time and waved me away. I knew this would be the last time I would meet with him like this. He was the new massa of the plantation, and I was just another slave. As I turned to leave, I saw the mistress carrying her bags to the door. She glared at me. I couldn't help but touch the hideous wound on my neck. I shuddered as I remembered the rope tightening. I hurried past her. I could not hide my relief. I didn't want her to see it and find another reason to harm me. I smiled as I entered the slave quarters. Smiling felt strange. I couldn't remember the last time I had smiled. I was going to miss this tiny, run-down shack. I grabbed my old, torn, and stained blanket and folded it as neatly as I could. I had nothing else to take. I owned nothing. I stared at where Big Mary used to lay for a long moment. I missed her. I closed my eyes and imagined her smiling. Big Mary had the biggest smile. Even its memory warmed the coldness in my heart. "Is you Rose?" a soft voice asked. I turned, startled. A thin, toned black woman stood behind me. I hadn't heard her approach. Normally, we heard every creak and sound in the big house. We had to in order to avoid an overseer pulling us into an empty room. The black woman was pretty, her head wrapped in old cloth that completely hid her hair. Her big, sharp eyes studied me as she bit her lower lip. "I am," I replied. The black woman nodded and motioned for me to follow her. I took a deep breath and hurried out of the room to catch up with her. I had always wondered what the field slaves did, how they lived. I had often sat on Massa Williams' porch, sipping the mistress's poison, daydreaming about being in the fields. The black woman seemed tense. She walked briskly, never once looking back at the big house. As soon as it was out of earshot, she stopped and turned to me. "Is you a spy?" the black woman asked. Her expression was stern, her voice tense. I didn't know how to answer. "No," I replied. The black woman studied my face for a moment, then nodded when she was satisfied with whatever she saw. "You're either a really good spy or you're not one," the black woman said. I was still confused. "Is you black or is you white? You surely don't look like us," the black woman asked. I sighed again. I didn't know how to answer. My mother was a black girl, and my father was my former massa. I honestly didn't know if I was black or white. The whites called me a nigger, so I figured I would just go with that. I'm a slave, I replied. The black woman nodded and waved for me to follow her. I guessed I had passed whatever test she had put me through. I'm Irene, she said. I had to nearly run to keep up with her. I smiled at her. I'm Rose, I replied. Irene smiled back. She was pretty and seemed innocent. I wondered if the white men had taken her into the woods yet. The haunting look in her eyes as we walked past them told me all I needed to know. I was surprised at how she could maintain her girlish innocence after that. I decided I liked Irene. I had never seen someone as cheerful as her. I wondered if this was how my mother had been, cheerful and lighting up any space she filled. Would Irene still skip and smile if life was forced into her belly, knowing that the life growing inside her would also be a slave, dreading and praying that it wouldn't be a girl? Eventually, all girls on the Williams plantation ended up in the woods or pulled into some dark hallway in the big house, raped. Irene stopped as we approached the field shacks. They looked so different up close. My view from Massa's porch had always been blocked by the trees. The shacks were old, run-down wooden hovels. You could see where rotted wood had been cleared and patched into the walls and roofs. But despite their desperate, decayed appearance, this was a community. The darker-skinned men and women worked and talked to each other. The overseers walked around with their whips on their belts. As long as the slaves worked, they left them alone. "You'll be in a shack with me," Irene said. She smiled at me. I envied her smile. I hoped she never lost it. It was hard to find a reason to smile as a slave. We all knew how to fake a smile, but to truly smile, like Irene, was beautiful. I nodded and followed her, passing many other slaves hurrying to complete their tasks. The air carried the smell of something wonderful cooking. That's Nana. She'll serve dinner when the overseers call the workday. That's normally at sunset, Irene said, as if she could read the question in my mind. Or maybe it was the loud grumbling of my stomach. Irene's eyes flickered to the thick scarf wrapped around my neck. "Why are you wearing that in this heat, girl?" Irene asked. I touched the scarf tenderly. It had become so much a part of me that I often forgot it was there, or how odd it must look to others. "Who's this white girl, Irene?" a stern older woman asked. I was grateful for the interruption. I didn't know how to explain my scarf, nor the horrible scar that it hid. "This here is Rose, Mama. She's from the big house," Irene answered as we neared an old shack, my new home. "The big house?" her mother asked. Irene's mother didn't look much older than me. The only signs of aging were the thin gray hairs that stood out among the dark black ones. Her face was stern, but she was pretty. Her eyes, however, told a different story. Where age hid in her smooth, dark skin, it was apparent in her eyes that had seen their fill of horrors. Irene's mother looked me over for a minute, then nodded. "Not used to having your kind around here, but come on in, girl," she said. I nodded and followed her past the rotted doorway. The door itself was just several old decaying boards nailed together. It seemed more for show than anything else. The shack was tiny. There was no bathroom, not even a bucket to relieve ourselves in. A small rotting table stood in one corner, and 2 beds made of straw lay on the floor across from it. Irene's mother never took her eyes off me. I set my torn and tattered blanket on the table. "You can sleep next to Irene, here," she said, pointing to a space that looked as though it had been prepared for me. There was no straw bed there, just a wooden floor that had been swept clean. May not be as luxurious as the big house, but it's home," she added. I wondered if this was how it was always going to be, people thinking I had been kicked out of the lap of luxury to live among them. "This is actually better and probably safer than the slave girl quarters in the big house," I replied. Irene seemed surprised by this. Her mother simply stared at me in silence. Perhaps she already knew or had heard stories of the horrors that took place under Massa's roof. "You playing with us, ain't ya?" Irene asked. I picked up my blanket and laid it next to Irene's straw mattress. "No," I replied. Irene stared at me, expecting me to explain. When I didn't, she just shrugged. "There are some rules here, Rose," her mother said, locking eyes with me. "If we are in the same shack, we are family, you hear? As white as you is, you're my daughter now. We look after each other," she said firmly. I nodded. "We also bathe," she added, wrinkling her nose. Irene burst into laughter. I didn't know what was funny. I couldn't smell anything. "Old Nana is about to ring the dinner bell. We don't venture off in the dark. First thing in the morning, before we hit the fields, Irene will take you to the river to wash up," her mother said. Again, I nodded. "You do know how to wash, right?" she asked. I assumed everyone washed the same way. I had never been to the river, but in the big house, we had a bucket filled with water. We wiped ourselves down as best we could with it. Her mother muttered. "I'll teach you the right way, don't worry," Irene said, smiling. Nana's dinner bell rang out across the fields. It was so loud that I wondered why I had never heard it from the big house. I followed behind Irene and her mother, hoping they didn't hear the growling of my stomach. The fields.
"The white man saved us from Africa,"
an older black slave shouted. He was dressed slightly better than the other slaves. He looked less beaten, less haggard. He ate better, that much was clear. The overseers all knew his name, smiling at him as they passed. When he broke plantation rules, they turned the other way. I wondered who this man was.
"They brought us Christianity and civilized us," he continued. "They taught us how to dress, how to live. The least we can do is toil in their fields."
Some of the darker-skinned men shouted in agreement. The only slaves who seemed to disagree were the women. "This is Samuel," Irene whispered in my ear. "He's Massa's pet." Looking closer at his graying beard and lazy eye, I recognized him. I had seen him often in the big house. Massa Williams would share drinks with him, talking for hours, not as equals, but as a man who was proud of his dog.
"If it weren't for the wiles and tongues of black women, we wouldn't be in chains. We wouldn't have lashes on our backs,"
Samuel shouted.
"Yes, it's their fault,"
a black man called out.
"We should have our own big houses,"
another one shouted.
"That's right, brothers. They're the ones keeping us in bondage. Their whispers of rebellion, their disrespect for the white men who saved us from loincloths and tribal wars. Our greatest enemy is not Massa Henry."
Samuel paused, letting his words sink in. He scanned the crowd of slaves gathered around him.
"It's not the overseers with their whips. It has always been the rebellious spirit of black women,"
he declared. The black men in the crowd cheered, some even shouting praise for Massa Henry and thanking the overseers. I was dumbfounded. They were thanking the very men who had brought them here in chains, the men who could hang them from trees at will. They toiled in these fields as slaves while white men dragged their daughters into the woods to rape them. Yet they blamed the darker-skinned women for their enslavement. "All right, get back to work," an overseer barked. He cracked his whip with pride, a grin stretching across his pale, cruel face.
I swear, Samuel, if you weren't a nigger, you'd be a rich man with that silver tongue of yours, the overseer said. Samuel smiled and bowed his graying head. I aim to please, massa, he said. The overseer patted his thick gray head like he was a dog. I felt sick to my stomach. I had been in the fields for a week now. The work was backbreaking. If we didn't meet the cotton weight quota, we were beaten. If a woman passed out from the heat, she was dragged into the woods, beaten and raped. We lived in filth and squalor. We ate the scraps the white men discarded. The men ate first. The women got their leftovers, when there was anything left at all. The dynamic of the field was strange. In the big house, we stuck together like a family. We knew who our enemy was, and we did our best to protect one another. Out here, it seemed like they went out of their way to get each other in trouble, hoping for a scrap from the overseer's table or a kind word from Massa. The only ones who truly had each other's backs were the women. I couldn't help the disgust I felt for Samuel. How could he serve the very men who enslaved him? He was the worst kind of traitor, a willing weapon against his own people. We better get back to the fields, Irene whispered. Samuel walks around taking note of who ain't working. My hands were swollen and bloody from picking cotton. I hadn't known there were thorns on the cotton plants until it was too late. I dreaded going back into the fields. The day wasn't even halfway over. We only stopped for meals and to listen to Samuel preach. Most of us didn't care what Samuel had to say, at least us women didn't. We were just happy for the break. Irene had been picking since before she could walk. This was easy for her. She rubbed oil on my fingers to help with the swelling. The only thing that made the work bearable for me was listening to the darker-skinned slaves sing. I had never heard anything so beautiful in my life. They sang about anything and everything, their voices rising and falling in sorrowful harmony. The part of me that was my mother felt at home in those songs. I connected with the pain and suffering in their voices. Before I knew it, we were being called to weigh the cotton. If we didn't meet our quota, we would be beaten. My heart pounded. My sack of cotton looked smaller than everyone else's. We lined up along the old dirt road, our brown skin glistening under the unforgiving Mississippi sun. "Weigh-in time, niggers!" an overseer shouted gleefully. He was excited. He was looking forward to whipping one of us. I looked down the line and saw only women. The men were already heading toward Nana's kitchen. I wondered why their sacks of cotton weren't being weighed. "You're really starting to bud, Irene," an overseer said, his tone thick with something vile. He licked his lips, his gaze lingering on Irene's slender body. I felt her tremble beside me. The overseer stepped closer, sniffing her neck like a hungry dog. "I like my slaves sweaty," he murmured. The other overseers laughed. "The sweat adds some flavor to their dark meat," one of them added. I cringed. Were they talking about raping Irene? "Why don't you go ahead and have your supper, Irene?" the overseer said, smiling. Irene's face paled. She looked at her mama, who gave her a silent nod. The overseer watched as Irene ran to the shacks. Then he turned his gaze back to the trembling women waiting to weigh their cotton. His eyes landed on me. His smile disappeared. "You all know who this is, right? The damn near white nigger?" he sneered. His foul breath hit my face as he examined me up close. I could see the rot in his teeth, smell the stench of his sweat. "This is old William's daughter. We've been instructed not to touch her.
he said. He ran his filthy fingers through my hair. The other slaves looked at me. I saw both fear and hatred in their eyes. Your uncle wants you safe and sound, the overseer continued. He traced a dirty finger along my lips. My stomach churned in disgust. Then his gaze dropped to my sack of cotton, much smaller than the others. He shook his head in mock disappointment. I know you didn't make weight, he said. The overseer's cold smile never faltered. You're a disadvantage, he said. The white blood running through your veins ain't meant for this kind of work. Now, pure African niggers like them. He pointed at the terrified black women standing beside me. They're built for this. That's why their sacks are twice the size of yours. He walked up and down the line, inspecting each sack of cotton with a smirk. You all got a good haul, he said. But someone's gotta get my whip. Can't touch the white nigger, Massa Henry's orders. He stopped in front of Irene's mother. How about you? He asked. He nodded to the other overseers. Without hesitation, they tore away her stained and tattered shirt, leaving her exposed. Irene's mother looked at me. I didn't know what to do. Her eyes weren't filled with anger, but with worry, not for herself, but for Irene. She knew these foul white men would try to take Irene into the woods. From the stories I had heard, Irene barely survived the last time. So this is where Irene gets it from, one of the overseers sneered. He grabbed her breast with his filthy hands. I couldn't stop the tears that rolled down my cheeks. Irene's mother had been kind to me, taking me in despite how different I looked. I hated the white blood in my veins. I wished I could burn it out of me. Well, well, what do we got here? Samuel's voice rang out. The overseers turned to him and grinned. They loved Samuel. He was their loyal dog, old, dependable, and willing to do anything for a pat on the head. We can't whip the white nigger for not making weight, one of them said. So we're gonna whip this one instead. Samuel's lips curled into a wicked smile. Can I watch? I love me a good wench whipping, he asked. The overseers laughed and nodded. Samuel stepped behind me. His breath reeked of tobacco and sweat. I know what you did, killer, he whispered. My eyes went wide. How could he know? No one was there. No one saw me. Samuel's grin widened as he felt me tremble. I know everything that goes on here, he bragged. The first crack of the whip cut through the air. Irene's mother screamed in agony. Her body jerked as the leather tore into her flesh. Blood sprayed, splattering onto my skin. I wanted to look away, but Samuel grabbed my face, forcing me to watch. No, you abomination. She's being whipped because of you. I won't let you turn away, he hissed. The whip struck again and again. Her screams grew weaker. Her body sagged. The raw flesh on her back split open deep enough that I could see bone. Is this what Massa Williams looked like when he died? Samuel whispered in my ear. The overseers finally stopped, watching as Irene's mother collapsed to the ground. Her back was flayed open, ribbons of flesh hanging loose. I didn't think she would survive. The overseers turned their cold stares on me. Next time, make your weight, one spat. Samuel released me. I'll be seeing you again, abomination, he murmured. As soon as I was free, I ran to Irene's mother. What are you doing here? One of the slave women asked sharply. I frowned. They would hate me for being Massa Williams' daughter. They didn't see that I was just as much a slave as them. Hush now, this ain't about her, an older woman said. They did this to make sure Irene's unprotected. Irene's mother let out a ragged sob, her bloody hand reaching weakly for me. Protect Irene, she gasped. I took a beating for you. Protect my Irene. The other women helped her up, preparing to take her to old Nan to be stitched and cleaned. I nodded, then turned and ran toward the shacks. I had to find Irene. I had to keep her close. Irene. Why must it always come to this diary? Why must they always try to steal the innocence of girls? They are thieves and murderers of the worst kind. Not only do they steal us from our homes, but they rip us from our mother's wombs and sell us off like cattle. And somehow, diary, they find the most intimate, most sacred parts of us, then steal that too. Just when I started to get close to Irene, to open myself to the idea of family, they took her too. I ran back as fast as I could to the old, worn-down shack we called home. Irene! I shouted. No answer. It wasn't hard to search our shack. It was too small for that. I could stand in the crooked doorway and see every inch of the place. My eyes fell on her straw mattress. If something had happened to her, it would break my already broken heart. This might sound strange, but being in the fields with the darker-skinned slaves was healing for me. There was something magical about their spirit. It came out in the way they danced, in their voices as they sang hymns to a white god who put them in chains. The warmth and love they carried, despite the pain and horror of their lives, baffled me. Then I saw it. Is that? I whispered. A dark stain on the straw. I hurried to touch it. Was it old? Was it from work? We all got cut and bruised in the fields. No. The blood was fresh. My heart slammed against my ribs. They had taken her. I ran out of the shack, my breath ragged. Ahead, I saw the women carrying Irene's mother into Nana's kitchen. I couldn't bring myself to look at her. She might die because of me. I was too weak to be in the fields. The longer I stayed, the more I put the people I had grown to love at risk. I turned toward the woods. They were vast. She could be anywhere. She could be lying in the dirt, dead. I wanted to scream. Irene was the sister I needed. I remembered her laughing in the fields, teasing me as she taught me how to pick cotton. I remembered her giggling over a boy she liked, dreaming of jumping the broom with him. I never understood that dream. If she had a baby, it would be born a slave. The boy she loved would grow into a man who resented her for being a black woman. Still, she loved. She had a heart untouched by the cruelty around us, a heart that refused to harden no matter how hard these white men tried to steal it from her. Irene! I shouted as I ran into the woods. Then I heard it, grunting somewhere off in the distance. I didn't know if it was her. I didn't know if the white men had some other poor girl out here. Irene! I shouted again, my voice cracking. I grabbed a heavy rock, gripping it tight. I didn't know what I would do with it. I just knew I felt safer holding it. Then I heard her scream. Rose! It was her. I ran, my feet pounding against the dirt. My chest burned, my legs ached, but I didn't stop. Rose! Shut up, bitch, a man growled. A loud crack, a heavy blow. I pushed through the trees and burst into a clearing. And then I saw her. Irene's face was bloody and bruised, pressed into the dirt. A rope was wrapped around her neck. She struggled, gasping, dirt clogging her nose and mouth. And behind her, a white man, his pants down, was thrusting into her as roughly as he could. I don't know what came over me. I screamed in rage and brought the rock down on the white man's skull as hard as I could. A sickening crack. He slumped forward. But I didn't stop. I struck him again and again. I thought of Big Mary swinging from the killing tree. I thought of sweet Juno, her body broken beyond repair. Most of all, I thought of my mother. "Rose," Irene's voice came softly, a gentle touch on my arm. I froze. I stared at the overseer's body, my breath coming in ragged gasps. His head was cracked open, his brain and skull clinging to the rock in my shaking hand. I sat back and let out a scream, one of rage, terror, and grief. They would hang me for this. Being Massa Williams' daughter would not save me. "We have to go, Rose," Irene said. I forced myself to move. I pried the overseer's pistol from his belt and tucked it into mine. Then I helped Irene to her feet. She was weak, barely standing. I didn't know what I was going to do. If I ran, they would blame me for his death and spare the others. If I stayed, I would surely hang. I glanced at Irene as we stumbled out of the woods, heading toward Nana's kitchen. Would they kill her too? She was beaten and broken. She wouldn't make it far if she had to run. "Help!" I called out as we neared Nana's hut. Several women rushed forward, catching Irene before she collapsed. "Mama!" Irene sobbed as she caught sight of her mother lying unconscious on Nana's table, her wounds stitched up but still raw. "What happened, girl?" Nana asked, her sharp eyes locking onto mine. Nana reminded me of Big Mary in many ways. She was heavy-set, wore the same stained apron Mary once had. But where Big Mary's eyes were empty, broken by years of watching children she raised be sold, abused, or hanged, Nana still had fight in them. If the white men had ever offered Big Mary freedom, she would have turned it down. She was a caged animal for so long that the thought of being free was more painful than the chains. But Nana would burn this place to the ground before she let them break her. "Rose saved me," Irene gasped. Nana's gaze flicked over me, taking in the bits of bone and blood splattered on my clothes, the pistol tucked into my belt. "You killed an overseer." The words settled over me like a heavy stone. I swallowed hard and nodded. The women around us whispered in fear. They all knew there would be hell to pay for this. "You have to run, Rose. It's the only way to save the rest of us from what you did," Nana said. I had already made that decision. "You have to take Irene with you." I frowned, glancing at Irene. She was barely conscious, blood still trickling from between her legs. She couldn't run. "No," Irene's mother croaked. She tried to sit up, but the pain overtook her. "You should have minded your own business." She spat at me, her voice filled with anger. "You did this to us." I stiffened. They had told me to find her, to protect her. When I saw her being beaten and raped in the woods, I did the only thing I could. "Don't blame her," Nana said firmly, placing a comforting hand on Irene's mother's shoulder. She protected Irene. Irene's mother turned her face away. "They'll know that white men took Irene into the woods. Nana continued. She'll be the first one they come for. She turned and disappeared into the back of the kitchen. The other women worked quickly, cleaning Irene's wounds, trying to stop the bleeding. Before long, Nana returned with an old sack in her hands. I packed enough food for 7 days, she said, pressing it into my hands. After that, you're on your own. Water is plenty, fine streams. Run in the middle of them to throw off the dogs. She grabbed my face in her rough hands. You hear me, girl? You don't stop. You don't look back. She handed me the sack, then spread a worn map across an empty table. We've been building this escape route for centuries. Follow the stars, Nana said. Her gnarled finger pointed to a cluster of stars shaped like a great cup. This is the drinking gourd. You see this star here? She pointed to one on its outermost edge. I nodded. If you look just beyond it, you'll see a very bright star. That's the North Star. Follow that. If you ever get lost, hide out until night falls and find the North Star again, Nana instructed. I nodded again and stole a glance at Irene. She looked grim, terrified. There are safe havens along the way, places for you to rest a spell, Nana continued, tapping at odd symbols on the map. My eyes traced the markings, each one a fragile promise of shelter. But most of all, don't trust any man, black or otherwise. You hear me? Nana's voice was sharp, edged with a warning. Black men ain't no better than white men when it comes to us. If it ain't a black woman, you run and hide. The women helped Irene to her feet. She limped over to her mother, her every step tender and painful. Leaning down, she pressed a kiss to her mother's hand with swollen, bloody lips. Her mother squeezed her fingers, her face taut with pain. Rose. I tore my eyes away from their goodbye and turned to Nana. These safe havens were built many generations ago. We don't know if they're still standing or still safe. You understand? I nodded. But I had no intention of stopping at any safe havens. I didn't care if they were safe or not. I only cared about getting far away from here. I didn't know what freedom was or if I'd even recognize it when I found it. I just knew I had to go. I had to leave the memories of the big house behind, the horrors in the woods, the overseer's blood on my hands. Ever since I killed Massa Williams, I no longer saw my mother dancing in the cotton fields. I no longer heard her humming in the wind. She had vanished from this place. And soon, I would too. The hounds. Wake up, Rose, Irene whispered. I could hear the fear in her voice. We had been on the run for nearly 2 days. We stayed by the streams, running through the water for as long as our bodies could bear it. We had no real shoes. Slaves didn't need them. Our entire lives had been confined to the plantation, and now we had to adjust to the harsh terrain. Our feet throbbed and bled, torn by jagged rocks and splintered branches. But we had to keep moving. I sat up, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. My head pounded. I hadn't slept much since we escaped. Irene was badly injured, and I had to help her walk, keep her wounds clean. Whenever we stopped, I let her rest while I stayed awake, staring at the stars. I needed to be sure I knew what the North Star looked like. I had to find freedom, and I had to make sure Irene found it with me. The hounds are closer, Irene said, her voice trembling. She was terrified. The last woman who ran was dragged back to the plantation in pieces. The slave catchers had let the hounds eat her alive. But I suspected it wasn't just the hounds that had eaten her. Working in the big house, preparing Massa's food, had opened my eyes to many horrors. One of those horrors was cooking and serving the remains of a slave. The white men would target a slave, usually a man, strong and well-built. They would torture him until he died. Then his body would end up in the kitchen with instructions on which parts to cook. The white men believed eating the flesh of a slave, especially one who was well endowed, would grant them the same endowment. I shuddered, remembering the smell of roasting flesh, the bubbling of stewed meat in heavy iron pots, and then the laughter of the white men as they ate, licking the grease from their fingers, boasting about how surprised their wives would be. The hounds barked again, closer this time. They had been tracking us since the first night. Eluding them wasn't easy. I had torn strips from my blanket, tossing them in the opposite direction to throw them off our scent. Whenever the stream split, I let pieces of my shirt drift downstream. But I was running out of blanket. So far, we hadn't found any of the safe havens Nana had pointed out on the map. Even if they were there, I doubted I'd risk it. The map hadn't been updated in years. And how could it be? Those places might have been taken over. Or worse, they might not exist at all. I swayed as I stood, dizzy from hunger and exhaustion. But it was nothing compared to the life I'd left behind. Feeling dizzy was freedom compared to what I was used to. "You ready?" I asked Irene. Every day she looked worse. No matter how often I changed her bandages or washed her wounds in the stream, the bleeding wouldn't stop. The scraps of blanket I'd used as dressings were soaked in blood and pus. She was getting weaker. I knew what that meant. Infection. I had no way to treat it, and from the look in her eyes, I could tell she knew it too. I wrapped my arm around her waist, helping her walk. Her stomach growled. "Let's put some distance between us and the hounds," I said. Irene nodded. "Never mind my stomach, Rose. It's been grumbling since the day I was born," Irene said. I could hear the pain and exhaustion in her voice. "Besides, you'll need it more than I will," she whispered. I pressed a kiss to her sweaty forehead. Her skin burned with fever. The infection in her blood was getting worse. "We'll make it together," I promised. We walked in silence for hours. Irene used all her strength just to put one foot in front of the other. She was fading quickly. No matter how fast we tried to move, the hounds kept getting closer. I reached for the pistol tucked into my belt. I had no idea how to use it, but just knowing it was there gave me comfort. I didn't want to kill another white man. The more of them I killed, the harder they would hunt me. "I need to stop," Irene gasped. She could barely stand. Fresh blood dripped down her legs, the smell thick and sour. Her skin had gone pale, almost gray. "Just an hour or so till nightfall," I said. "They don't hunt at night." But one look at her, and I knew she couldn't go on. She was dying. Tears burned my eyes. I let them fall. Irene smiled at me, soft, sweet like always. Even now, with death pulling at her, she could still smile. I remembered the first day I met her, how that smile had disarmed me. Irene was a miracle. She had suffered, yet she refused to let the world take her innocence. It was her strength. "I must look real bad, huh?" she teased, her voice barely above a whisper. I laid her down gently on the ground and covered her with what was left of my tattered blanket. "When we make it to freedom, we'll sit and watch the sunset and drink lemonade." Irene said, her breath shaky. I forced a smile. We had spent so many nights whispering about what we would do when we reached the North. The truth was, I had no idea what the North even looked like. No idea how I'd know when I got there. Maybe the white folks weren't any different. Maybe up north was just a slave's fantasy. But I couldn't tell Irene that. The hounds were getting closer. My heart pounded. I pulled the pistol from my belt, aiming into the coming darkness. Irene's hand touched my arm. "You have to leave me, Rose," she said, her smile never wavering. I shook my head, the tears coming harder now. "I can't," I whispered. Everyone I had ever loved had died because of white men. I couldn't lose her, too. "I think we found him," a man's voice shouted through the trees. Irene sighed, her breath shallow. "I won't last another day, Rose," she gasped. I doubted she'd last another hour, but I still couldn't pull myself away. She was the only pure thing left in my world, the only light in my darkness. And without her, I didn't know if I could bear to go back into that darkness alone. Irene smiled again, even as her body trembled. "You have to kill me, Rose," she pleaded. My face paled. It took everything in me just to convince myself to leave her here. But to kill her? I shook my head. "I'm dying anyway, Rose. We both know that. I don't want to die a slave," Irene said, her voice fragile. She paused, struggling to catch her breath. "You know what those men will do to my body." She reached into her torn, bloody clothes and pulled out a knife. "I would do it myself, but I'm afraid, Rose," she whispered. Sweat dripped from her brow. Her fever was too high. She was burning up from the inside out. The hounds were closing in. I could hear them panting, snarling, tearing through the brush. Irene locked eyes with me. She was begging me. Sobs racked my chest. I couldn't hold them back. "I don't want to die a slave," she said again. I nodded. She was going to die anyway. The infection had run its course. Irene had been hoping for more time, maybe just enough to sit beneath a tree as a free woman, to take one last breath of free air before she slipped from this world. But if I let the white men take her, they would make her last moments a living hell. Slowly, I took the knife from her trembling fingers. She never looked away from me. Her smile never wavered. With a shaking hand, I slid the blade deep into the side of her neck. I watched, not caring if I got caught, as blood bubbled up between her lips. She began to choke. Her blood was thick and hot as it sprayed against my skin. "Thank you," Irene gasped. "There them niggers are," a white man's voice bellowed. I didn't stay to watch her die, to see that precious light fade from her young eyes. I pressed a trembling kiss to her forehead and ran. I had no idea what direction I was going. My vision was too blurred by tears. I just put one foot in front of the other and hoped I didn't run into anything. As I ran, I thought of Irene. I hope she died before the white men or their foul hounds reached her. She was right. If they got to her, they would have taken turns ravaging her dying body. They might still do it, but Irene would be gone, She wouldn't feel their hands, wouldn't hear their laughter. I hoped she was dancing in some field with my mother, smiling, finally free. As heartbroken as I was, I found solace in one thing. Irene died a free woman. That may not mean much to whoever reads these words, but to a slave who has only known bondage and torment, being able to taste freedom, if only for a moment, was worth more than all the gold in the world. The Abolitionist. I couldn't remember how long I ran. I just ran until my bruised and battered legs could carry me no further. Eventually, the sounds of the hounds faded, and with them, the shouts of the white men. I wondered if they took Irene's body back to the plantation, or if they left her there to rot. A part of me wanted to turn back, but even if I did, I wouldn't know which way to go. I was lost. I had been running on pure fear. I remembered the white man's face when I turned away from Irene, how his eyes locked onto mine. He knew I was still alive. He knew I was still running, and they wouldn't stop hunting me. Had I made a mistake? Was running away really worth it? The white men would hunt me to the ends of the earth. I was free of the plantation, but in a world ruled by them, was I ever truly free? I ran until my lungs burned, until my ribs felt like they might crack from the strain. The hounds were quiet now, so were the men. They had likely made camp for the night. I prayed they left Irene's body alone. But they had the luxury of hounds. I could run all night, and they would still find me. They had no need to rush. I stopped for a moment, pressing my back against a tree, my chest heaving. Then I leaned over and vomited. I wasn't sure why. I had barely eaten. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was the guilt of killing Irene. I gasped for air and stared up at the night sky. The North Star shone bright above me. I was off course. "We gonna sit, watch the sunset, and drink lemonade, ain't we, Rose?" I turned sharply. I swore I heard Irene's voice. Was I losing my mind? I took several deep breaths and pushed forward, heading toward the North Star. I knew I wouldn't sleep tonight. Even though I was sure the white men had settled in for the night, I couldn't stop running. My feet slipped on something wet. Blood, maybe? My feet had been bleeding since we fled the plantation. I had so many cuts, bruises, and blisters, I lost count. It was a miracle I could still stand. I told myself I would tend to them when I stopped for the night, if I ever stopped. "No!" I shouted as my foot caught on something and I fell, hard. My head slammed against a rock. Pain exploded in my skull. I wanted to scream, but all I could do was gasp as the blackness closed in. "Please, no." I barely whispered the words before the darkness swallowed me whole. "Is she black or white?" A woman's voice. I was moving. I didn't want to open my eyes. I wasn't ready to face the reality of being back in slavery. I had been free, if only for a few days. It was terrifying, and I had been hunted like an animal, but it had been glorious. Now that I had tasted freedom, I couldn't imagine going back. I was lying in the back of a wagon. I could smell the horse, feel every bump in the dirt road beneath me. I don't know. Maybe she's one of those abominations the pastor talks about. You know, when the blood of blacks and whites are mixed. A man's voice this time. Abomination. I remembered how people looked at me. The whites, the slaves. I was an oddity, a spectacle, something that didn't belong anywhere. Either way, she's wounded, the man said. She looks like she's on the run. Maybe she's just a really light black, the woman said. I slowly opened my eyes. My head throbbed. Blood had crusted over my brow, tightening my skin. I was dizzy, too dizzy to run, too dizzy to even think straight. I needed to find the North Star again, but I wasn't sure if I could even stand. She's awake, a little girl's voice shouted. I sighed. I didn't have the strength to fight, but I was not going back to the plantation. The child leaned down, her face beaming with a toothless smile. Her hair was a muddy brown, uncombed for days, and tangled with bits of straw. Stay away from her, the woman warned. The little girl pouted, but backed away. The wagon jerked to a stop. I heard a heavy thud as the man jumped down from the driver's seat. Slowly, I sat up, my head feeling like it might explode. My vision blurred as I tried to focus on the man who approached me. He held a rifle in his hands. We mean you no harm, he said. And yet he leveled a gun at me. Paul, the woman scolded. She shot him a glare from across the wagon. Paul hesitated before lowering his rifle. I tried to stand and stumbled. Black dots clouded my vision. I squeezed my eyes shut, waiting for the wave of dizziness to pass. Are you black or white? Paul asked. I didn't answer right away. My mouth was dry, my throat sore. I swallowed hard as another wave of nausea swept through me. I don't know, I gasped, wincing at the pain. My hair was stiff with dried blood. I reached up to touch it and flinched. There were stitches in my scalp. They had cleaned the wound and sewn me up. Paul let out a frustrated sigh. He didn't understand how someone could not know the answer to such a simple question. Honestly, neither did I. My father was a white slaver. My mother, a black slave. What did that make me? I wasn't black. I wasn't white. I was something in between, something different from both. Are you a free woman or a slave? The woman asked. Paul nodded, as if this question made more sense to him. His world was black and white, no nuance, no in-between. I took a deep, painful breath. I was born a slave to a mother who was a slave, I said, my voice hoarse. But I am a free woman. I kept my eyes shut. Opening them hurt too much. So you're black then, Paul said. I shook my head slowly. Paul exhaled sharply, his frustration growing. My father was Massa Williams, I said, my voice hollow. He raped my mother. The woman let out a deep sigh. She's one of those white blacks, she murmured, nodding to herself as if she'd suddenly found clarity. White blacks, Paul repeated, still confused. She's a runaway slave, Paul, the woman said. Paul finally put his rifle away. That explanation made sense to him. Without another word, he climbed back into the driver's seat and took hold of the reins. The woman turned back to me. We are abolitionists. Do you know what that is? She asked. I didn't. All I knew was that they were white. And when it came to slaves, white people could not be trusted. I shook my head. The woman sighed, disappointment clear in her eyes. We are Christians who believe slavery is wrong. We are all children of God, white or black. We help runaway slaves make it to the North, the woman said. Paul grabbed the reins and flicked them hard. The horses lurched forward. White people were strange to me. They enslaved us, brutalized us, ripped our families apart, then expected us to be grateful when a few of them decided to clean up the mess they made. The woman waited for me to respond. When I didn't, she glanced at Paul and frowned. "We're headed to a refuge for runaway slaves," she continued. "Once we get there, you can choose to stay or continue north. Please consider staying until you've had time to heal."
"God bless you,"
Paul muttered.
I wanted to run. I didn't trust white people, especially white Christians. They had done so much evil to us in the name of their white God that I often wondered if the Satan they preached about was the actual good one. But I could barely move. Pain throbbed through my body with every bump in the road. My head felt like it had been split open. I leaned over the side of the wagon and vomited. Then, exhausted, I lay back down and closed my eyes. I didn't know what this refuge for slaves was. It sounded too much like another plantation to me. Either way, I wouldn't be going anywhere until the pounding in my head stopped. The refuge. "Wake up, sweet thing," I heard a voice say. Soft hands were shaking me. I was afraid to open my eyes. I didn't want to face the world as a slave again. My head still pounded, like something inside my skull was trying to escape. "Let's get you a bath," a woman's voice said. I sighed and opened my eyes, almost screaming in pain. The sunlight made the pounding in my head worse. What happened to her? A woman asked. It was silent for a moment. I was thankful for it. "We found her on the road, bleeding from that gash in her head," Paul said. I tried to sit up and found myself lying back down. "I sewed her up and Paul put her in the back of the wagon." His wife paused a moment. "She is one of those white blacks," she whispered. I struggled to sit up again. I felt like I was some disease to them, some strange creature they wanted to get rid of. "A white black?" the woman asked. I turned to her and couldn't help but smile. "Big Mary?" I gasped in pain. I knew it couldn't be her. I remembered seeing Big Mary hanging from the killing tree. I shuddered at the memory of her body swinging in the breeze, the sickening thump as it swung back against the tree trunk. I didn't know why, but I started to cry. "No, sweet thing," the older black woman said. She wrapped me in her strong arms. For the first time in my life, I felt safe. I couldn't hold back the sobs and pain I'd been carrying inside. I missed Irene. I wished she was here. The woman patted me gently on the back, then motioned for someone to help me to the bath. I pulled away in terror when I saw a big black man approaching. Nana's voice echoed in my mind. "Never trust a black man." I reached for the pistol in my waistband and sighed when I realized it wasn't there. The black men on the Williams plantation had been just as cruel to us as the whites. Paul handed my pistol to the older black woman. "She had this on her," he said. The woman stared at it for a moment, then looked at me. "You from the Williams plantation?" she asked. I nodded. She sighed. "That explains it," she said. She handed my old pistol to the black man and helped me to my feet. "Thank you, Paul. We'll take it from here," she said. Paul smiled and happily jumped back into his wagon. "You don't have to fear old Joe here," the woman said, pointing to the black man holding my pistol. He was huge, his arms as thick as tree trunks. His back and arms were covered in scars, the kind that could only come from the master's whip. "He's not like the men on the Williams plantation. They're a bad sort there," she said gently as she led me to a hut. "Old Joe is like you, I suspect," the woman said.
I had to stop to catch my breath. "He has killed white men," she added. I nodded. It felt strange to admit it. "Is that how you got that pistol?" she asked. Again, I nodded. We entered a hut with a huge metal pot in the middle. Steam rose from the hot water inside. "Give us a minute, Joe," the woman said. Joe nodded. It was then I noticed he didn't have a tongue. The woman waited for Joe to leave before helping me remove my old bloody rags. She inhaled sharply, her breath hitching when she saw the scars and wounds covering my body. "Dear God," she whispered. Even though I was naked, she pulled me into a hug. I could feel her shoulders tremble. Was she crying? "Forgive me, child. I wasn't expecting that," she said. Her eyes settled on the scarf around my neck. "Is there a reason you wear that?" she asked. I frowned and hesitated before removing it. I hated showing the scar around my neck. Not that it was any worse than the many others that marred my skin, but this one showed I had been hanged. The woman shook her head sadly and helped me into the steaming water. I flinched in pain as my body adjusted. The water quickly turned a reddish brown as days of blood and dirt washed away. The heat seeped into my bones, soothing my aching body. Gently, she washed my hair and cleaned the wound on my head, the one Paul's wife had stitched. "Do you plan on staying, or will you continue north?" she asked. My plan had always been to go north, but I wasn't even sure if north truly existed. A place where slavery was outlawed seemed like a dream to me, a fantasy of the enslaved. Something we told ourselves to make our world feel less bleak. "Is there really a north?" I asked. The old woman smiled. She wasn't new to this question. "Yes, child," she replied. She seemed so certain. Had she seen it? Or was she just another hopeful believer like so many of us? "Have you seen it?" I asked. The woman nodded. "I was born in the North, child. I was born a free woman. I have never been a slave in my entire life," she said. I looked at her in shock. It was strange to meet a black person who was free, who had never been enslaved. I hadn't thought such a thing existed. "What is it like?" I asked. She knew exactly what I meant. She had probably been asked this many times before. "I don't know how to explain it. I have never been a slave, so I can't speak about it in a way that compares to your experience," she said. She paused, thinking. "But I am still a black woman. This world, be it North or South, hates us. Even though slavery isn't allowed in the North, we ain't safe there either. White men hang us, rape us, even burn down our cities just because they feel like it," she said. I sighed. The North sounded like slavery in disguise, an illusion of freedom. No chains, no forced labor, but our bodies still suffered the same abuse. Had I made a mistake by running? At least on the plantation, I had the protection of my uncle. Out here, I had nothing. I was just another nigger. It wouldn't be long before some white person reminded me of that. The woman sighed at me, disappointed. "I can say that you have a much better chance of living somewhat normal if you stick to our cities. We have our own farms, stores, even our own guns," the woman said. I had never seen a black person with a gun before. I didn't even know how to imagine that. "Why are you here? Aren't you at risk of being enslaved?" I asked. The woman sighed and frowned. My brother was captured by William's catchers. Being out here and hoping he would find his way here is all I have," she replied. I didn't know who her brother was, but if he was on the Williams plantation, he wouldn't run. The men there were elevated above the women slaves. They were just as brutal to the women as the white men were. They did their work and were almost rewarded for being men. They were still slaves, but only occasionally reminded of it. Slavery for them and slavery for us were very different. I didn't have the heart to tell her this. She was a kind woman, yet it troubled me that she was risking her life for a brother who would sooner turn her in for a pat on the head from an overseer than run back to the north. "The men on the Williams plantation are not likely to run," I said. I didn't know what else to say. I hoped she would eventually figure out that her brother was lost and head back home. I have heard stories and seen women like you react to black men. I just hope my little brother is different," the older woman said. I nodded. I still wanted to go north. I wanted to be as far away from the Williams plantation as I could be, but I was just as afraid of blending into an all-black free community as I was of running from the whites. I was not like most black slaves. I did not look like them, and just like on Massa Williams' plantation, they would hate me for it. "Can I sit here a moment alone?" I asked. The black woman nodded. She seemed to understand. I had a lot to take in. My head still pounded, and I just wanted a moment to sit here and cry. White nigger. The next few days, I rested and healed. I hardly got out of bed. I hadn't truly realized how badly I was hurt until I was able to rest. Every bone and muscle in my body ached in some way. The older black woman came by every night and gave me some herbal tea. I felt strange, diary. Was this freedom? I was so used to getting up at the crack of dawn to serve the massa in the big house or to head to the fields. I had never truly rested before. Now that I had the chance, I felt restless. I didn't know what to do with myself. Every time I tried to get up and help with the chores, I was rushed back to my shack and told to rest. I hadn't realized how much I needed it, not just for my battered body, but for my soul. After nearly a week, I was finally allowed to join the others. I knew how to cook and clean the kitchen, so I volunteered there. I had spent most of my life in the big house kitchen. Doing this was like breathing for me. Even though I wasn't required to work, I felt like I had to. I wondered if that part of slavery would ever leave me. But I knew I wouldn't stay here long. I had to see the North for myself. If I could live like this, in a place where slavery was illegal, I would find a way to make it there. That night, the freed people gathered around a bonfire, telling stories. Some talked about Africa. The elders of their plantations had tried to keep the stories of where they came from alive. That was a struggle in itself, given how hard they had crammed Christianity down our throats. I thought about men like Samuel, enslaved men who found power and station among the whites by pushing their propaganda onto the rest of us. It was refreshing to hear tales of the land my mother's people came from. I sat by the fire and listened. They sang songs and spoke of their escapes. "I've been curious about you," a man's voice said. The fire crackled. The air felt heavier. All was quiet. I wasn't sure who he was talking to. "Are you white or black?" the man asked. They all stared at me. I sighed. Over the years, I had started to hate myself. I wished my skin were as dark and beautiful as my mother's had been. I wished my hair were as thick and curly as theirs. I hated my father's white blood that coursed through my veins. I hated his features that were stuck on my face. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was an abomination, cursed by their white god to never fit in anywhere. I am, or was, a slave, I replied. That seemed to be enough for most of them, but not the man.
But are you black?
He asked again. I stared into the fire. Everyone waited for me to answer. I didn't understand why this meant so much to them. I didn't know why I couldn't answer that question. My mother was black, I finally said. She was just a girl when the massa pulled her into the woods and raped her. After she gave birth to me, she was hung from a tree. Many of the freed people sighed and nodded. I may not have looked like them, but I was connected to them. I had come from the same pain and struggle they had.
So, you're a white nigger,
the man said. Some of the freed people murmured in disgust. Her mother was black. She was a slave. She is black. Leave her be, a woman said. Many of them agreed with her.
If she is the daughter of a massa, she was not a slave like us,
the man accused.
She lived in the big house. She is one of them.
I sighed. It always came to this with them. I was raised in the big house, I began.
See, she is not one of us. Why is she even here?
The man said. I was tired of this foolishness. A slave was a slave. What made theirs suffer and worse than mine? Their skin tone? I stood and faced him. His brown face looked almost sinister in the firelight, his eyes filled with hate. Did he see a white woman when he looked at me? You think the big house was some kind of vacation? Some summer home? I asked. I didn't realize I was shouting. Every single night, I fell asleep to the sound of a slave girl being raped just beyond the door of our quarters that were worse than the field shacks, I said. I looked around at the dark faces watching me, listening to every word that left my lips. I never knew when my night would come, but when it did, my white father pulled me into the hallway and raped me. Some of the freed women shook their heads in sorrow and disgust. The mistress of the house blamed me for her husband raping me. I swallowed hard. This was difficult to talk about. I reached for the thick scarf around my neck and pulled it away, stepping closer to the firelight so they could see the ugly scar. She hung me from a tree, I shouted. Tears streamed down my face. I lifted my shirt so they could see the lash marks from the whip, the scars and bruises from more broken ribs than I could remember. I heard gasps of horror as they took in the damage written across my body. Because my father wouldn't let his jealous mistress kill me, she made me sip poisoned lemonade every morning to make sure I could never bear his children. I was sobbing now. I did not ask to be born with white blood in my veins. I was just as much a slave, just as much at the mercy of the massa as any of you. The man stared at me. He had no words. I doubted he had ever endured anything close to what I had. I doubted any of them had. Slavery was hell for all of us, but for those of us in the house, it was a special kind of hell. I am not a white nigger, I said. I am just as much a slave in this world as you are. I took a deep breath. I was angry. I hated being doubted simply because my skin was lighter and my hair was looser. I turned to leave, but felt a hand on my shoulder. I spun quickly, reaching for the pistol that was no longer in my belt. It's okay, sweet thing, the older black woman said. I sighed, relieved to see her. You are one of us. Anyone who doubts that is a fool," she said. The other freed men and women nodded. "Sit a while, dear," another woman said. I nodded and sat back down. Someone started singing an old song from Africa, but I didn't hear it. I just stared into the fire. I would leave this refuge, this place of peace. I only hoped the people in the North were more like the black woman who had cared for me, black men and women who had never been slaves, who had never felt the sting of the masses' whip and looked up to see a white nigger sitting on the porch in the shade, drinking lemonade. Of course, they didn't know the nightmares we faced under the masses' roof. But I could see why they hated me. Back on the run. I decided to leave that night. I didn't want to say goodbye to anyone. I didn't care to. They had shown me what they thought of me. I wondered how long they had been waiting to say those things to me. Did they see me lying beaten and bloody in bed and seethe, knowing a white nigger was being cared for? The more I interacted with slaves, freed or otherwise, the more I didn't want to be associated with them. As horrifying and twisted as this may seem, I only felt accepted in the big house. I was with other slaves who looked like me, who didn't hate me for having white blood in my veins. I missed the big house. I never thought I would say those words. I didn't miss being a slave and everything that came with that. I missed being around my own. As much as I loved to listen to the field slaves sing, I wasn't them. I didn't know what I was. We shared slavery and a connection to Africa. Outside of that, we were completely different. Most were not like Irene and her mother. The more I stayed among them, the more uncomfortable I became. The freed people stayed by the bonfire late into the night. None of them noticed me leave. I was happy about that. Being in the big house, we learned how to not draw attention to ourselves. The attention of white men was the last thing we wanted. I hurried back to the shack I had been staying in. I didn't have much, a change of clothes and some food I'd been saving for this moment. "You will be needing this," a familiar voice said. I turned to see the older black woman who had cared for me standing in the doorway. She held out my pistol. I wasn't sure if I wanted it. Staring at it reminded me of Irene, of that foul man forcing himself on her. "Thank you," I said, and took the pistol from her hand. I was glad I didn't have the pistol earlier. I would have shot that black man. Maybe I wasn't right for any community. Being a slave that had to kill for freedom had changed me. I could feel the anger bubbling up in me for no reason. Maybe my soul was just tired of being hurt. I knew I would kill again. Being a freed slave woman in a world dominated by white men ensured that for me. "I also have this for you," the woman said. She handed me a map. This map was well drawn and looked much better than Nana's map. She pointed to a spot just on the edge of Mississippi. "There is a river, maybe 2 or 3 days' walk east from here." She pointed to the river on the map and ran her finger along it all the way to Ohio. Ohio is a northern state. It's where I am from. A day's walk north of the abolitionist port is my town, the woman said. She stopped for a moment and stared at the spot where her home was. I could see the yearning in her eyes to return there. After a moment, she pointed back to the spot on the edge of Mississippi. "There is another abolitionist camp here. Tell them Sarah Freeman sent you, okay?" Sarah looked like she was about to cry. I stared at her for a moment. She was too soft to make it out here. Her heart was too big. The world needed people like her, but out here by herself, she wouldn't last long. I felt bad for her. I wished I could remember a time that I was like her. But I never was. I was born a slave, and slavery was all I knew. It dawned on me that I had never told her my name. "Thank you, Sarah," I replied. "My name is Rose," I said. Sarah smiled. She had a pretty smile. It was a shame she hardly had reason to share it with the world. I didn't have a last name. I liked hers, Freeman. It had a nice ring to it. But deep down, I knew that name did not fit me. I knew I would never be truly free. The shadows of slavery would forever haunt me. It reminded me of an old slave man named Wilford. He had run from the plantation. When they caught him, they cut off one of his legs from the knee down. Even years afterward, he said he could still feel his foot itching. He said it was his soul that still remembered his leg, the one that had long rotted in the earth. I figured slavery would be like that. Though I would be free of it, I would still feel its sting. Rose Hummingbird Williams is my name, I said. Sarah hugged me. "That's a beautiful name," she said. I sighed. It was a name filled with horror and pain, but it was me. I never knew my mother's name. She was just Hummingbird. I don't know why I took my father's name. It wasn't to honor him. It was to spite him. He never wanted nigger blood to taint his bloodline, but I am here. I hoped me carrying his name disturbs him in his grave. I have a sister named Sandra. She will take you in. Let her know I'll return next year," Sarah said. She pulled away from me and frowned. "I'm going to miss you, Rose Hummingbird Williams," she said. I nodded and hurried past her. I was so used to walking north that it took me a moment to figure out which way was east. It felt good to be back on the run, to be alone. I walked all night and deep into the next day. I was tired, but too restless to try and sleep. I tried to stay off the main road and move as quietly as I could. I was still a runaway slave. I didn't want to risk an encounter with anyone. Sometimes the paths off the road were thick and overgrown. It took me a while to walk around areas like that. But I felt safer. If I could make it to the river, I would be okay. I didn't know the exact spot where the abolitionists were, but I figured it wouldn't be too hard to find them. The farther away from Massa Williams' plantation I got, the safer I felt. This could really happen for me. I could really be free. As the sun began to set, I was weary. I had to find some place to rest. I had not eaten anything since I left the refuge. I wondered if they noticed I was gone, if they cared that the white nigger had left them. They might feel safe there, but I knew deep down it was only a matter of time before the slave catchers found their camp and raided them. They had no security and no way to defend themselves. Most of them were not killers like me. They would willingly go into the chains. I didn't belong with people like that. People like me would make things worse for them. I touched the hilt of the pistol in my belt. I'd rather die than be a slave again. I found what looked to be a small cave hidden behind some bushes. It was far enough from the road that it could not be seen unless you were right on it, but close enough that I could hear people on the road. I checked to make sure no animals lived there and sat back. I was exhausted, so tired that I didn't even have the energy to eat. I had walked for nearly a full day. I leaned back and wrapped my thin blanket around me. Before I knew it, I was asleep. Samuel.
Why would you run from the men who saved you from being a savage in Africa?
I heard a familiar voice shout. For a moment, I thought I was having a bad dream.
You are fed. You have a roof over your head. And most of all, you were given the mercy of the white man's God," the voice shouted.
I opened my eyes. "Samuel?" I whispered. I grabbed the pistol from my belt and stared off into the darkness, my heart pounding in my chest. I was still groggy. I had not slept for very long. I had not been discovered yet.
"What you niggers call slavery, I call freedom. Freedom from savagery, freedom from starving in the African jungles, freedom from the black heathen gods that will condemn you to hell,"
Samuel's voice boomed. I was miles away from the Williams plantation. Why would Samuel be way out here? I wiped the sleep from my eyes and took a deep breath to still my beating heart. I had to see what was going on, but I was afraid to move.
Ephesians chapter 6, verse 5. "Slaves, obey your earthly masters with fear and trembling, in sincerity of heart, as to Christ,"
Samuel shouted. He seemed to have no fear. Why would he? He proudly served his white massa. His service came with perks that most slaves were not granted.
"The white man's God tells us to obey them as we would Christ, for they are holy and we are not,"
Samuel shouted. I closed my eyes, hoping the pounding in my head would ease. I had to move. I had to see what Samuel was doing. But no matter how much I wanted to, my body would not obey. His voice started to fade. I could still hear him shouting, but it was further away. He was heading toward the refuge. The runaway slaves there had no weapons, no way to defend themselves. What if he found them? I thought of Sarah. She was not built for slavery. None of us truly were, but most of us had the advantage of being born as slaves. Slavery was all we knew. She would break and die under the masses' whip. I looked up at the sky. I knew it could not be much further to the river. The fate of the runaway slaves who thought I was nothing more than a white nigger was not my problem. But then again, Samuel had come from the direction I was heading. Had he raided the abolitionist camp? Were the people he was shouting at slaves he had caught there? I had to know. I slowly stood and packed my thin blanket. I could no longer hear Samuel shouting. I started to doubt if I had ever heard it at all. I walked back toward the refuge. Every fiber in my being was screaming at me to turn around, to head to the river. This was not my concern. But the thought of Sarah Freeman in chains bothered me. It wasn't long before I heard Samuel's voice shouting again. The closer I got, I realized they had made camp. I could see the soft light of fires near the road. They had no fear of being seen, no fear of wandering white folks eager to put them in chains. They were the monsters that lurked in the shadows. I lay on my stomach and inched toward the light of their fires. As I neared their camp, I could hear the sobs of black women as they sat chained to each other. Many were beaten and half naked. I shuddered as I thought of the horrors those men were inflicting on them. I thought of Irene, her face being forced into the dirt as a white man beat and raped her. Black men paced the camp with rifles. I did not see a white face here at all. Samuel was hunting runaway slaves, he and black men like him who loved white men more than they loved themselves. They saw their slavery as the will and work of God. They embraced it and exacted the wrath of the white man's Jesus upon their own kind. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I had to do something. A black woman screamed in the distance. "Please, sir," I heard her beg. A cold chill went down my spine.
"Look what we have here,"
Samuel's voice rang out. I turned to see him standing above me, a pistol pointed at my head. My heart sank. I knew I should have minded my own business. I should have kept walking toward the river. Samuel smiled. He looked evil in the soft firelight. The white nigger who murdered her father, Samuel sneered. I was still weak. I had not fully recovered from the wound on my head. Maybe I should have stayed in the refuge a little longer. Maybe that would have given me a better chance. Samuel hit me hard with the side of his pistol. My head felt like it was going to explode. I screamed in pain. I always wanted to fuck you, murderer, Samuel said. He grabbed my feet and dragged me away from the camp. I faded in and out of consciousness. You are the closest to a divine white woman my black ass will ever get, Samuel muttered. He ripped my pants off. No, I whimpered. My cry of protest only seemed to fuel his desire. He smiled and leaned down, whispering in my ear. Yes, white nigger. I felt him force himself inside me. I clawed at the dirt helplessly, trying to pull away. Call me Massa, Samuel commanded. He pushed my face hard against the ground. Dirt filled my mouth. Every time I tried to breathe, it clogged my nose. I started to choke. I didn't want to die like this. Not like my mother. Not a victim of some brute in the woods. Samuel spasmed and stroked my hair. I might keep you. Would you like that? He asked. He turned me over, forcing me to look him in the face. I remembered I still had my pistol. Samuel, like most vile men, assumed I was powerless, that I was just a runaway slave who would cower and fall back in line when cornered. I pulled the pistol from my belt and aimed it at his face. The smile faded. You don't even know how to use that, he scoffed. I pulled the trigger. A loud boom echoed through the night. Blood splattered across my face. Samuel's body slumped forward, collapsing on top of me. Half of his face was gone. He was still breathing. He glared at me, his eyes full of rage and disbelief. He tried to scream, but all that came out was a gurgle. He was choking on his own blood. I pushed him off me and looked into his dying eyes. If there is a hell, I hope you burn there with my father, I whispered. I couldn't look away as the light faded from his eyes. I had to watch him take his last breath. I had to see this monster die. Samuel wheezed. It almost looked like he was trying to smile. His body flailed violently, sending a chill down my spine. It was as if he were fighting to keep his vile soul from leaving his body. Then, finally, his eyes closed. I smiled. Samuel was dead. Another remnant of my father's plantation taken from this world by my hand. I slowly walked toward the camp. I must have looked like a monster myself, covered in Samuel's blood, limping into the firelight. The black men who had followed Samuel saw me and ran. All fight had fled from them. Samuel had been their massa. Without him, they had no purpose, no one to tell them what to do. I pointed my pistol at one of them and fired. He screamed in pain and fell to the ground. I limped over to him. Keys, I whispered. I could barely stand. My strength was quickly fading. I don't know, the black man stammered. I sighed and shot him again. The keys had to be on Samuel's body. Despite him being dead, I was afraid to go near him. Mistress? One of the chained women whispered. I looked at her. I am not a mistress, I replied. Did they think I was a white woman? I didn't know why, but the thought of it angered me. It invalidated my entire life, everything I had been through, everyone I had lost. The woman nodded silently. There's no key, Miss, the woman started. I shook my head. I was a slave just like you. How do I free you? I snapped. My strength was waning quickly. Take a rock and hit here, the woman said. She pointed to a piece of metal sticking out of the chain around her neck. I limped toward her, scanning the ground until I found a rock heavy enough to do the job. Can you do it yourself? I asked. The woman nodded. I handed her the rock and sat down. The world was spinning. I didn't want to pass out again. It was too dangerous. I lay back in the dirt, trying to steady my breathing. Are you okay? The woman asked. She was standing over me now. I nodded weakly and pointed west. Walk in that direction as fast as you can. There's a runaway slave refuge a day, maybe 2 away. I gasped. The woman knelt beside me, kissed my forehead. Thank you, sister, she whispered. Tears rolled down her dirty cheeks. I forced a smile. Something about her calling me sister made me feel whole, made me feel seen. I watched as they ran toward the refuge. I hoped they made it. No one deserved freedom more than enslaved women. I didn't want to move. I just stared at the sky. The sun would rise soon. I needed to get clear of here. Get up, Rose, I whispered. I prayed my body had some strength left, enough to get me back to that little cave I had found. Get up, Rose, I whispered again. Taking a deep breath, I forced myself onto my feet. I stood still, eyes closed, waiting for the pounding in my head to ease. 1 foot in front of the other, Rose, I muttered. I tucked my pistol into my belt and walked over to where Samuel's body lay. I spat on his corpse as I grabbed my sack of supplies. You won't hurt anyone anymore, I whispered. I stared at him for a moment. I didn't know why, but I couldn't pull my eyes away from the hole in his head. I had killed 4 men so far. I hoped I wouldn't have to kill any more. Their faces haunted my sleep. They were evil, horrid men, but for some reason, my soul was still troubled by taking their lives. 1 step at a time, I said to myself. Forcing my gaze away from Samuel, I turned and made my way back to the cave. We are going to be free, Irene. I promise, I whispered. Mississippi River. The next couple of days are a blur, diary. I stumbled and walked without much thought. It took everything I had just to put 1 foot in front of the other. Every fiber of my body begged me to lie down and rest, but I knew if I did, I would never get back up. Every hour, the voice in my head pleading with me to give in grew stronger, more enticing. I honestly don't know how I resisted it, how I stayed on my feet. I must have looked like a walking corpse. I had not cleaned the blood and brains of Samuel off of me. I limped badly. My entire body ached. It wasn't that I didn't want to clean myself. I just knew I couldn't stop. Stopping for any reason meant I would die. I can't remember much of those days, walking toward the Mississippi River, but I do remember when I finally made it there. The sun was starting to rise. I had shambled all night. I was close to collapsing right there on the dirt road. My heart and will were strong, but my body was on its last legs. I'm sorry, Irene, I whispered. I could see the river, not far ahead. I could hear voices near the water, but I couldn't find the strength to go any further. My knees buckled, and I fell to the ground. I knew I wouldn't be able to stand back up. My body had given up on me. "Help!" I tried to shout, but what escaped my throat was little more than a whisper. I didn't know if the voices belonged to slave catchers or abolitionists. I didn't care anymore. If they were slave catchers, maybe they'd kill me. That was the only true freedom for us. I could dance in the cotton fields of heaven with my mother, run through the woods with Irene again. "Help!" I tried again. Like before, the sound barely left my lips. I was ready to let go. As I started to sink into the dirt, I felt the pistol still tucked into my belt. This would definitely get their attention. With trembling hands, I pulled it free, pointed it toward the sky, and slowly squeezed the trigger. The explosion shattered the silence of the coming dawn. I let the pistol fall from my hand and lay there, waiting with my arms limp at my sides. I couldn't fight anymore, even if I wanted to. I doubted I even had the strength to lift the gun again. I heard men shouting in the distance, the heavy thud of booted feet rushing toward me. "Over here!" a man called. I couldn't hold myself upright anymore. My body collapsed, my face slamming into the dirt. Pain exploded through my skull, my vision blurred. "Help!" I gasped as the men approached. "It's a girl," one of them said. I felt strong arms lifting me, carrying me. I didn't know who had found me or where they were taking me. It didn't matter anymore. I drifted in and out of consciousness. One moment, I saw the dawn sky, heard birds singing to welcome the rising sun. The next, a black woman was standing over me, frowning. When I finally came to, I found myself in a tent. My clothes had been changed. "You're awake," a voice said. I turned toward it and was met with the warm smile of a black woman, not much older than me. I nodded weakly. "Where am I?" I asked. My head throbbed with every word I spoke. I closed my eyes, hoping to stop the pounding. "You're at the Free People of God's camp," the young woman said. I didn't know who they were, but I assumed they weren't slavers. "She up?" a man's voice boomed from outside the tent. "Yeah, she's up," the black woman replied. The tent flap opened, and a tall, older white man stepped in. He smiled at the woman. "She's a natural healer, praise God," the man said. His eyes were a deep brown, kind but watchful. The woman nodded and left the tent. "You were nearly dead when we found you," he said, studying my face for a moment. His kind expression hardened, his voice turning stern. "Your wounds seem to be on the mend, but I need to know, how did you find us? We are a Free People's camp. Our location is not known to just anyone." "Sarah Freeman told me to find you. She said you would help me get to the Free City in Ohio," I replied. I rubbed my temples, hoping it would ease the pain. The man's smile returned, his demeanor instantly changing at the mention of Sarah. "So, you're a runaway slave?" he asked. I nodded. He studied me closely, his eyes scanning my hair, my features. "Who is your father, do you know?" he asked. I found the question strange, but it seemed he could see the black in my blood. It was refreshing not to have to explain what I was. "Massa Williams," I replied. The man frowned. "I met Mark Williams once. I'm sorry to say, but he was not a godly man," he said. I nodded. I wasn't sure what else to say. Massa Williams was an evil, vile man, and I hated acknowledging him as my father. The man sighed deeply. The Bible speaks about you half-breeds. Your life is going to be hard, but no, Jesus still loves you. He patted my arm. Then as he turned to leave, he stopped at the tent's entrance. A boat leaves in an hour. You're welcome to take it to Ohio, he said before stepping out. I didn't know why these white men thought I cared about the love of their white God. I had suffered because of their Jesus. I had been made a slave in his name. My mother had been killed in his name. Their Jesus was just as vile to me as my father was. I didn't know if other slaves, outside of those like Samuel, prayed to the same God their masses prayed to. It seemed foolish to me to expect help from the very God whose name had enslaved me. I stood and nearly fell. I grabbed onto the cot to steady myself. I had made it. I wasn't in the North yet, but for the first time, I felt like I might survive long enough to see it. We're going to make it, Irene, I whispered. Slowly, I walked out of the tent. The black woman was waiting for me. You ever been on a boat before? She asked. I shook my head. It can be bad for some people. With your head injury, you should stay on your cot with your eyes closed, okay? The woman said. I nodded and followed her. I could hear the running water. It sounded heavenly, like a chariot that would carry me far away from the Williams plantation and the hell of the South. The camp was alive. Black and white people sang and talked together like equals. I struggled to believe it. Maybe I had truly died. Were you a slave? I asked the black woman. She stopped for a moment, then shook her pretty head. I was born in the North. I was born free. The abolitionists aren't like the average white folks. Don't expect them to be this friendly when you get to the North, she said. I nodded. Sarah had warned me about this as well. The North was free, but it wasn't without the hate and evils of white men and women. I wondered if life would be any different for me in Africa. The older, darker-skinned slaves seemed to miss the land of my mother's ancestors. But unlike them, I had white blood in my veins. Would I be a slave there as well? The boat was big, not some rickety ferry made from scrap wood. It was nearly as large as a ship, and it seemed out of place on the Mississippi River. Then again, the river wasn't small either. It just looked strange to me. I had never been to a river before, let alone seen a boat. The woman helped me across the deck. Another free soul! Thank you, Jesus! A man shouted when he saw me. He smiled warmly. Jesus loves you. He loves you so much, he set you free, he said. He handed me a Bible and opened his arms for a hug. I flinched. I hated being touched, especially by a white man. He saw the fear in my eyes and frowned. God bless you, he said softly. I forced a smile. He wasn't a fool. He knew slave women had been ravaged and abused by men who shared his likeness. I didn't know what to do with the Bible. I wanted to throw it away. I hated even touching it. But I didn't want these white folks to change their minds and send me back to the Williams plantation. So I clutched the Bible to my chest and nodded. I would get rid of it later. I can't explain how I felt when I stepped onto that boat. My mother's people had been forced onto boats in chains, never to be free again. And now, many generations later, I was walking onto a boat freely, without chains, sailing toward a land where slavery was outlawed. Would my mother be proud of me? Was she somewhere smiling, humming something sweet just for me? The boat rocked on the water as I stepped aboard. My footing was already unsteady from my injuries, and it took me a moment to adjust to the motion beneath me. The woman led me to an old wooden chair on the deck. "Sit here," she said. She gestured toward the worn-out chair. I did as I was told. It was uncomfortable, but I didn't care. She handed me a thick wool blanket. "I thought you'd like to see the water as you sail to freedom," she said. I smiled and thanked her. "I hope I never see you on this side of freedom again, girl," she said. She squeezed my hand and left me alone on the boat. I stared at the water for a moment. "We're almost there, Irene," I whispered. Something unexpected. I can't truly explain my feelings, diary. I sat in my chair, wounded, wrapped in the thickest blanket I had ever had in my life, and watched the camp fade into my past as the boat took off. I was just as scared as I was excited. It was like walking into a dark tunnel. You know there is light at the other end, but what lurks in the darkness between, and what monsters wait on the other side? We were on that boat for nearly a week. With each passing day, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. I was the only runaway slave on board. Because of how I looked, I was able to stay on the deck and watch the country roll by. I by no means could pass as white, but from a distance, when my hair and features could not be clearly defined, I could blend in. I had never been out of Mississippi before. The further north we traveled, the more the weather and land changed. "Help us, please!" someone shouted. "They're gonna catch us!" The voice cried out again. I stood on the deck and saw a black family waving frantically from the shore. White men with dogs and rifles were not far behind them. "We have to help them!" I shouted. One of the abolitionists glared at me. "Hush now," he growled. The people on the boat made the sign of the cross over their chest as they watched the black family get slaughtered before their eyes. I could hear the mother's screams as they dragged her off into the woods and out of sight. A cold shudder crept down my spine. "How could you just watch?" I demanded. For a moment, no one answered. It seemed they had no answer to give. "We can't help everyone, nor can we intervene. The day we do, they will hunt us and our families just like they did you. Secrecy is what keeps us all safe," a white woman finally replied. She patted my arm gently. "All we can do is pray for their souls and hope for redemption with the ones we are able to save." I sighed. As angry as I was, I knew she was right. The white men of the South would hang them right next to the darkest slave. Sarah's words haunted me. I wondered how truly different the North was from the South. To her, only slavery was outlawed. But in the eyes of most Northern whites, we were nothing more than escaped animals. I would find out soon enough. I didn't have the stomach to look at the countryside as we sailed by. My heart couldn't take seeing black folks running for their lives, hoping to catch the boat that I was safely on. I sat back in my chair and wrapped the blanket around me. I didn't want to see any more. I wanted to go to sleep and wake up in the North. The one time I ventured back out to stare at the fading South, I saw black men hanging from trees right on the riverbank. They knew a boat carrying runaway slaves passed through here. They wanted to send a message loud and clear of what waited for us if we got caught. My heart sank further. It had been 2 weeks since my encounter with Samuel. I started to feel sick. I found myself throwing up over the side of the boat into the murky waters of the Mississippi River. "You okay, child?" an older white woman asked. She stood next to me and patted my back. "Maybe if you remove that, you could breathe better," she said, pointing to the thick scarf tied around my neck. "I'll be okay," I gasped. "Let me help you," she said. Before I could stop her, she reached for the scarf. As she pulled it back, she gasped and stepped away, startled. "Dear God," she whispered. I quickly fixed the scarf back around my neck. "I'm sorry. I didn't know," the woman said. I did my best to force a smile. I didn't understand white people's need to put their noses where they weren't wanted. But she was kind, and I was at their mercy on this boat. I was hung by the mistress of my plantation. I don't like people to know, so I hide the scar, I say. The white woman rushed forward and hugged me. I don't know why, but I cried in her arms. I had been holding it in since I saw those Southerners drag that black family back into the woods. She patted my head gently. "You didn't deserve that, child. I love you, and Jesus loves you," she whispered. I doubted Jesus loved black people, but I kept that to myself. "I don't think you have the river sickness," the woman said. She gently patted my stomach. I frowned, confused by her gesture. She couldn't think I was pregnant. "When you've helped birth as many babies as I have, you recognize the glow of new life," she said. Suddenly, I felt dizzy. I sat down on the deck of the boat. If this woman was right, I was carrying Samuel's baby. The horrid man who gladly sold his own people for white men's approval. The man who raped me. The man whose brains were probably still stuck in my hair. I shuddered at the thought. "I can't have this baby," I whispered. The woman frowned. "All life is precious and belongs to God. That's why we risked our own necks to save you," she said. I shook my head. "You don't understand. This man raped me. He tried to kill me." The woman sighed. "God acts in mysterious ways, young lady. All we can do is accept what he brings into our lives," she said. She patted my back and left me on the deck. "We will be docking soon in Ohio," a man's voice shouted. I should have been excited about finally being in the North, about finally being free and safe from the Southern slave catchers. But all I could think about was the possibility of being pregnant, of carrying Samuel's child. I was little more than a girl myself. I had barely seen 16 years of life, and all of those years had been as a slave. What was I going to do with a baby? A child born from rape, a child whose father I killed, a child who ran the risk of one day becoming a slave. I stood and walked back to the chair where I had slept for the past week. I collected my meager belongings and stood on the deck. I wanted to take the blanket, but I figured some other poor soul who found themselves on this boat to freedom could use it more than I could. I folded it neatly and set it on the chair. The boat had come to a stop. The air here felt different, lighter, cleaner, not as thick as the air in Mississippi. I took a deep breath and sighed as I looked at the black people standing on the dock. They were smiling and waving. They weren't dressed in rags. They didn't have the look of slaves. Black men stood guard with rifles in their hands. This was a city owned and run by black people. "We made it, Irene," I whispered. I walked to the edge of the boat. Black men and women were singing a song about freedom. I wondered how many of them, if any, had actually been slaves. How could they appreciate freedom if they had never had it taken from them? "Welcome to freedom, ma'am," a white man said. His smile lit up his face. He was proud to have saved me, to have ushered me from the arms of his demonic kin to a place of safety. I nodded and stepped off the boat onto the dock. "Welcome home!" a woman shouted. So many people were smiling at me. I was hugged more times than I could count. No one seemed to notice that I was several shades lighter than them and only a shade or two darker than the nearest white person. No one seemed to care. I was a slave who had made it to freedom, and that was all that mattered to them. At least at this moment. I was free. I was home. Samuel's baby. Time seemed to pass quickly for me. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. Before I knew it, I was on the birthing table, my legs spread, a woman between them, waiting to catch the baby that would soon come from me. I hated this child. There was no joy in this pregnancy for me. I remembered the night I realized that the old white woman had been right. I was pregnant. I had walked out into the darkness, a knife trembling in my hand. I pressed the blade to my swollen belly. "I can't have you, child," I whispered. I had no love to give this baby. I was barely learning to love myself, still trying to overcome the lifelong scars of being a slave. I had no room in my heart to be a mother, even more so to a child bred from rape. Even now, though I was free, I was still a victim of what every enslaved mother faced, the lack of love and joy in motherhood. The knowledge that your child would one day be sold away. Guarding your heart, refusing to get attached to the masses' property growing inside of you. A piece of property forced into you by some brutal white man. Even as a free woman, I struggled to believe I was truly free. I saw how the white traders glared at us when they ventured into our city. I heard the stories of black towns burned to the ground by jealous white sharecroppers. Freedom here in the North was a fragile thing. I was afraid to even whisper its name, for fear it might shatter into a million pieces. As hard as I tried, I couldn't force the tip of the blade into my stomach. Instead, I screamed in rage and struck my belly with my fist. I loved and hated this thing inside of me. I had no choice but to love it. The bond between a mother and the child in her womb could not be severed. And yet, every time I thought of the baby, I saw Samuel's face, his cold, wicked grin as he held me down. I saw Irene's mother, beaten near to death because of me. I saw the blood and the hole I had put in his skull. I still had nightmares about him. "Push, Rose," a black woman said. I screamed as I bore down. I wanted this child out of me. I couldn't bear having it inside me a moment longer. Black women held my hands on either side of me. Another wiped the sweat from my forehead. For the first time, I felt like I had a family. These women loved me. They embraced me. Before I even had a chance to look for Sarah Freeman's sister, I had been taken in by a black woman who had recently lost her daughter, a girl about my age. That's how it worked here. The men and women who got off that boat were taken in by a family. They were instantly welcomed, instantly loved. These blessed people knew we had seen horrors they could never fathom. "The baby's coming, Rose." The women smiled with excitement. To them, this child was another member of their growing free city, a city that seemed like a fool's dream to most people in the South. I took a deep breath and pushed harder. I wondered if these women would still love me if they knew what I had planned, if they could still look me in the eye and see me as one of them. I had approached a white trader who frequently came into town. All white men knew someone who owned slaves. Even though slavery was illegal in the North, there were men who captured black folks who strayed too far from town alone and sold them back to the South. I was going to sell this child. I couldn't be around it. I couldn't let Samuel's child benefit from all I had been through just to be free. Maybe I wasn't so different from my father after all. Sometimes I was ashamed of myself for even considering selling someone into slavery. After everything I had endured, knowing firsthand the horrors that awaited, especially if this child was a girl. It was either sell the child or drown it in the river. But I was too much of a coward to hold the baby beneath the water, to watch its tiny face struggle for breath. These women had never been slaves. They had never been raped. They had never gone to sleep to the sounds of girls they grew up with being violated, their cries piercing the night from just a few feet away. They had never feared that they might be next, that some overseer might take a liking to them as they worked. They had never known the horrors of the big house. So how could they judge me? Despite being free for nearly a year, I was still greatly traumatized. I still woke in the dead of night, drenched in cold sweat, sometimes screaming. And the woman who had taken me in would run into my room and hold me. She would caress my hair and tell me I was safe. But you are never truly free from slavery. Your body may no longer be chained, but the scars it leaves on your mind and soul remain forever. "Here it comes, Rose," one of the women said excitedly. I screamed and pushed as hard as I could. I felt the child move out of me, and with it, a pressure lifted, not just from my body, but from somewhere deeper. I felt like I was in a daze when I heard the baby cry. "It's a boy, Rose. You got a boy." They tried to place him on my chest, but I turned my head away. The women exchanged glances, taken aback. I wasn't ready to hold him yet. "You have a name for him?" one of the women holding my hand asked. I had never truly thought about what to call this baby. I had never planned to keep him, so naming him had seemed pointless. "William," I said. The women smiled, oblivious to what that name meant to me. I named him that to spite Massa Williams, my father, to spit in the face of his wife, the woman who had hung me from a tree and tortured me. She had dreaded the thought that her husband's bloodline might be tainted by black blood. "I like it. William's a good name," one of the women said. They all hovered over the baby I had yet to see. "William has beautiful blue eyes," another woman cooed. "A black boy with blue eyes and soft hair like his mother. All the women in the city will swoon for him," another said. They spoke as if the traits of a brutal white man who forced his genetics into me were some kind of blessing, something to be admired. I was disgusted. I would rather my son look as black as they said my mother was. I would rather she be honored. But instead, my vile father was. I wondered if Samuel was laughing at me from hell. I had birthed a child he would be proud of. A boy whose skin would be slightly darker than mine, his hair just as soft, and his eyes a striking blue. I wondered how he would have fared as a slave. Would he have been in the fields, or would he have been light enough to be accepted as the massa's son? "Your son is hungry, Rose," one of the women said. They had cleaned him up. Still, I had yet to look at him. "It's not his fault," my new mother whispered in my ear. "However he was conceived, he is innocent." She gently placed William on my chest and helped him latch onto my swollen breast. I couldn't stop the sobs that poured out of my battered soul as this child suckled from me. Finally, I looked at him. My heart fluttered. He was beautiful. My fingers found his curly black hair, stroking it softly. "William," I whispered. A part of me wanted to throw him out the window. Another part just wanted to hold him forever. "It will take time, Rose, but I am here for you," the woman said. She kissed my forehead and left me alone with my child. She had been so kind to me. I wondered if she would still feel the same about me if William never came home. I was supposed to meet the trader tomorrow. The money he offered would be enough for me to buy my own little cottage. I worked in a kitchen. Cooking and cleaning was all I had ever known. I could outcook and outclean most of the women in this city. But looking at William now, I wasn't sure if I could go through with it. He wasn't my father. He wasn't his father either. He was something new. He had my mother's blood in his veins. I wondered if he would be able to hum the way she did. The money would change my life, but at what cost to my soul? If I sold him, I would be no better than my father. If I kept him, I would love and hate him for the rest of his life. I patted William's soft head. "I'm not sure what to do with you," I whispered. This has been The Diary of a House Negro, The Big House, The House Negro Book 1, written by Angrbiracial, narrated by Star Williams. Copyright 2024 by Jesse A. Macbeth. Production copyright by Jesse A. Macbeth.